The City of Oconomowoc Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, September 19th. We just completed the closed session, item 2A. Now we're going back into the open session. We're going to start off with a discussion on maintenance options for Concord Road. Jason, what do we have?
All right, thank you, Mayor. All right, yeah, I just wanted to bring this right back as we had some discussion and overview talk about this last council meeting. So again, I just would like to bring this project back as this might not be completely normal for every road project, but due to the size and the options and the cost, I wanted to present some of the options here to be clear with the expectation of this project. So again, this project is along Concord Road from 2nd Street south, just down south of Riverdale. It's about 1.25 miles, $1.5 million to replace. This is the area also in your packet. Some of these diagrams are in there to help with the areas I'll be discussing. So yes, this project right here is in multiple different cross sections. Basically, if you will, the Lincoln Street Bridge to the north is more your urban setting with the subdivision, more common city road section with curb and gutter, sidewalk, and pavement. South of the bridge, is right here between the bridge and Allen Road is the area that I'd like to talk a little bit about, as that area right there is not the typical road section, as this is a 2-lane road with no curb and gutter. And right now, there is a sidewalk and a trail that is adjacent to this Concord Road that picks up a lot of the residential homes and extends along Allen Road and south along Concord Road, but it does not completely go the whole way. So this area right here is the existing pathway. So again, north of the river, this is the urban section that I call more your curb and gutter and sidewalk section. And the idea is, and the option that I'm asking if there's interest, is if we want to continue that type of cross section south of the river. There is the sidewalk along the south side of the road, the concrete sidewalk that comes off of the bridge and goes to the west and south as it goes around the curve. If you will, this area on the south side of the road is heavily used for some parking. Asphalt did go in there, probably to clean up a lot of poor drainage. So the project itself, in any case, this area will be improved to look a little different. But that sidewalk does continue as it gets close to the intersection of the subdivision to Hickory Creek, and then it crosses Concord Road and goes and connects to the asphalt trail that is now on the north side, on the right side of the picture there.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Go back to that. One more, okay. Can we put a sidewalk on the other side of the street? Or
Excuse me?
Can we put a sidewalk on the other side of the street where the big blue house that's never been
On the south
finished?
side more?
Yeah.
So right now the trail is on the north side. Can a sidewalk be added on the south side?
Correct.
There's a number of different options. It's a matter of sidewalk has been typically handled with an assessment process. The trail went in with, I believe it was a grant funding, but a much different way of installing the sidewalk. So can it go in?
I'm sorry, that side, that trail, what do you want to call it, is just, to me, it's cheesy. They just kind of threw down some blacktop and said, okay, we're good with it.
Okay.
And, you know, we did something, I'd like to see something like we did at Thackeray, which was actually put a sidewalk there. I think it would be very good and safe for our citizens. And I think it would aesthetically look good for the community, for that road especially.
Okay, and that's one of the, you know, ideas, options I'm asking here is if that type of cross-section wants to be extended like it is on the north side of the road where there is sidewalk on both sides with curb and gutter, Thackeray Trail type look. Right now, that idea would, I'm looking at over $1.5 million to get something like that in there for this area
Really?
on top of the pavement.
Not just for the additional sidewalk, you're talking about the whole package you're showing us here, with
Probably,
the curb and
no,
gutting.
on top of replacing the road, so
Right, but the curb and gutter, but not just, he added in that additional sidewalk, that wouldn't be an additional $1.5 million, or would it?
That's what he just said.
from the bridge to Allen Road, if we wanted to make that type of look, you're looking at
Okay.
adding new curb, base, elevation, sidewalk, driveways, grass, terrace.
But you wouldn't be adding new driveways.
Yeah, you do, you have to repair the driveways,
You're replacing it all right there.
and Thackeray.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, it's an extensive
and then-
project.
So then would you tear out the pathway that's there and replace it with sidewalk?
Because it's well kept, I'm not saying that it isn't, but it just looks cheesy.
Yeah,
And-
I'll share a couple more photos that might support that.
Okay.
So I'm going to continue driving, if you will, with me to the south and around this corner. As you can see, that pathway is very close to the road. It's 4 to 5, sometimes 6 feet away from the road. There is no curb to separate or provide any protection. As you're getting around the curve, it continues with that. As you can see, coming around that, it's a very close proximity for that area, that sidewalk or trail, if you will. And then it comes in and it connects to Allen Road, which does have an improved curb and gutter section to it, that the option that I'm presenting, besides just replacing the asphalt, would tie into that. So, just to recap, that area that I just discussed, from the bridge to Allen Road, it has more of the urban setting, like the residents are close to it. It does allow that to be picked up if we wanted to do the road and improve to the limits of the right-of-way by putting sidewalk, curb and gutter, all of that in. That would be an additional 1.5 for that project, or that piece.
Just for that small piece, 1.5.
That's over a half a mile of pavement right there that you are completely reconstructing. Adding storm sewer, which is a
How
big,
much did Thackeray cost?
Thackeray was 3.5 million.
And what are we talking about, a mile there? Is that a half mile?
Just under a
Three
half mile.
quarters of a mile.
Was a mile, and that was at 3.5?
It was actually 5 million once you add in all
5?
the
Oh,
utilities,
you're thinking all the way.
storm sewer.
I remember it was already dug, there was some stuff there already, but we had to.
Right.
yeah, it's a very impactful project.
When you say Thackeray, do you mean from Silver Lake to Summit or from like Silver
From
Lake?
Summit to Silver Lake.
Oh,
that
okay.
whole
Not
thing.
like the part that
So
wasn't
Thackeray
existing.
was done in 2 sections. One was the extension,
Right.
and then we rebuilt the existing.
Oh, okay.
It was about 2.3 million for the extension, and it was 5 million to reconstruct the existing with utilities.
Church paid for some of that, though.
They had to
That's the
pay for part
extension.
of the extension.
That's
yes.
correct, yeah, okay.
It's a big number, it's a big project. So that, again, that's,
But that
Why
seems
I'm pre-
about right, though, because.
Excuse me?
That seems about right, because that's what we paid for Thackeray.
Yeah.
But if we're gonna do the road, I don't know.
yeah, you have the option of just doing the road, addresses the pavement. There is a trail in place right now. It does allow for picking up, all of the property owners along Concord Road, and it gets them to the north, and it gets them to Allen Road. A little bit south of Epler also picks up some of the subdivision there. So are we serving some of the residents in there? Yes, but to your point, there are better cross-sections that we have installed in other places. So that's why I'm asking, I want to be clear about this.
You're saying reconstruction from Allen Road to Bridge. You mean from Allen Road to the bridge to the,
To the south.
to the south?
Yeah,
Or,
so-
no,
Oh,
to the northeast.
correct. So Lincoln Street Bridge, I'll call it.
From Lincoln, from Lincoln to Allen.
Yeah,
Lincoln down.
Lincoln Street Bridge to Allen. It's just over a half a mile.
Could you go forward a slide, I think? One where you're showing, one more.
Keep going.
This area to me really is, I mean, all of it needs to be repaired, but this in particular, now that's private property
To the north.
Like it.
to the north. So
There's a decent amount of right-of-way there. But yes, there's one sizable lot there that's been for sale.
That is horrible to ride your bicycle on.
Oh, it's terrible.
That I can attest to. But I have to say, Kevin, that trail that's already existing, that's in really good shape.
It's about
I didn't say it
six
wasn't.
years old.
I didn't say
It's
it wasn't.
actually, it's in a good shape for walking
So the
around.
I'll give you a couple benefits. Benefit of keeping the trail is it is 8 foot wide. The city does plow it, so it is easy to maintain. Typically, when we've gone down to narrower concrete sidewalks, we require the homeowners to do the snow maintenance and clearing of it.
It's exercise.
So I'm just saying, it's a change. Right now, the residents do not maintain that sidewalk, the city does. So if we change that and stayed consistent with the rest of the ordinance of clearing adjacent sidewalk, that might change. Yes,
Chaz?
Yeah, well, and then you had mentioned one of the other downsides to the curb and gutter is it actually reduces the lifespan of the road itself, right? There's like more,
you have to definitely design for the drainage subsurface.
yeah, which costs
to
even more
allow-
money.
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, listen, like, I was, one of the advocates of looking at the Concord Road, the road itself. I appreciate you bringing all these other options forward. From my perspective, it's, the cost is, I don't think it's I think it's too high of a cost to be looking at adding the curb and gutter. I think it's like the road is the main point that needs to get repaved. I guess my concern, though, is like, instead of spending extra money on a curb and gutter, why aren't we extending the repaving of Concord all the way to Wisconsin Avenue? Because like, that road in between the OFP former place, the taekwondo, or the jujitsu place, I mean, that's a terrible road too. And like going over the railroad tracks there is terrible. So what was the logic there that entire span got left
Well,
out?
again-
And you're only starting from Second Street?
Yeah, a good question. It goes back to kind of staying consistent with utilizing your pavement rating criteria and the results that come from that. So they are ranked higher, which I looked at it after you mentioned that. I drove out there and said, hey, because they were different. From one number to the next number is at least 10%, right? So, why are those numbers different? I went and looked, and yes, those are in better condition, which they're newer pavements. So when you're building your pavement replacement, you are taking a lot of the criteria and applying it to the city in general. I have to narrow down a scope of work instead of spending the whole budget on one thing, and I do separate a lot of these projects based off of proximity of when they were installed and the ratings that they are currently. So the area between Second Street and Wisconsin is rated higher, so it was not included in this, and the money was kind of diversified into some other projects throughout the city. But while we were inside of this scope of work, I wanted to analyze any of the pieces that were negotiable, if you will, by having a couple different options. What we do on every project, we may not share that with you, but this one is sizable and has a big cost difference.
It's pretty rough going over those railroad tracks right there.
I
I mean.
I agree with you there.
Gotta
It's,
slow down, Chaz.
What's that? Well, you gotta go like 2 miles an hour. I mean, because it's like, I do go usually
Yeah,
pretty
I'm wor-
slow, so it never bothers me, but then I've had some people complain to me about it, and so I drove over it like at more of a normal speed, and I was like, whoa, you know, so.
I'm working on the South Main ones right now. Those are.
Jason, would
rail.
there be an opportunity that you could look at just where the railroad tracks is? And see
I'm
if
looking at them all, honestly.
Okay.
And
I'm
maybe
trying
there's
to-
an area there that we could adjust and then also talk to the.
Yeah. I'm working on South Main and mentioning the others too.
Okay. Karen?
So
Karen
on
was next.
that area right there where it says improve shoulder and parking, what would you do there?
This area I would look at, this is where I would consider putting curb and gutter up against the sidewalk
Right.
and having that asphalt go right in there, you know, right tight up to the curb and gutter. Then we could have a pull-off parking area.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, maybe
you could-
parking there because you've got the river right there.
Right. And then we could collect the water, as we do have catch basins there already that discharge to the river.
That wouldn't be such a bad idea.
Right.
Okay, so question, so what is Concord rated right now under the PACER system, like a 1 or a 2?
Actually, it's a 3 or 4. It's a
Oh.
mix between 3 and 4.
Okay, and then from Second
This area
Street,
is a
from
2 or
Second
3.
Street to Wisconsin, you said that's higher, but what is that ranked at approximately?
Those are in the 6 and maybe even a block of 7. in there.
Okay, and so what in your thought process would be a time frame where then we would look at redoing Second to Wisconsin?
I'd have to go back and look. I have it identified.
Okay.
I put together that 10-year map, and depending on how the budget comes together, that will kind of marry together how we distribute some of the streets. You know, working on our Silver Lake Street and Lapham and Lisbon. We have some big projects scoped out. But yeah, then I try
And
to,
Jason, if you could maybe make an assumption that's not approved, but that we're going to spend $3 million a year on roads.
Yep.
Maybe that would give us a ballpark idea of where that lies in your general
yep,
plan.
I've got it on there, and I can share that with
Yeah.
you.
Is that what
somehow.
you're looking for, Karen?
That would
Okay.
be good, thank you.
Yeah,
Good.
and others as well.
Other questions for Mr. Herzog?
Is there a way that we could combine one of the projects with just the tracks itself? You know, adding that to,
Well, it's the,
One of
it's
the
the railroad's right-of-way, CP's right-of-way, and they're the ones that would end up having to do
Okay.
it, unfortunately. And I'll try to be mindful of time here, but I still want to get to the southern piece of this project.
Let's go.
So again, this trail, the existing trail does get to Allen Road. Mayor, you can help me out with how to decide to move forward and these options. But, so the next option is as we go to the south, this area in red, just south of Allen Road, right here, just for understanding, this area I did not recommend any other option. There is a trail there already. It's an 8-foot asphalt trail, and it has better separation from the road. As you can see on the right-hand side, that's closer to 8 to 10 feet away from the road. And to me, that is where you typically would want to design a trail and to keep that separation, especially since the road is straight. So I did not recommend anything here. This area would continue to just be replaced, fix the road. So if you will, I'm going to move to south from Epler Way all the way to the southern parts of our limits of the project. Really what I want to discuss, there is no trail in this area, there is no sidewalk in this area, and there are 10 homes on this piece,
It's a nice hill, too.
and there's a big hill.
I love that hill.
Yeah, you can, so my thought here is to ask about the option to extend the trail that is there currently on the west side possibly. The west side, in my mind, has more space, but there are some major grading challenges. On the right side of the picture is the west side, and there are a number of obstacles engineering-wise to figure out. Grading, I've built these trails before. I've built a lot of retaining walls before, but nothing over a mile that might present itself here. So you can see these hills, are 5, 6 feet plus. There's private retaining walls along the right-of-way property lines that would have to be negotiated and figured out.
And a cemetery up there too, right?
And so you can see there, the backyards to some of these are extremely elevated. The cemetery has the same situation here, that you would be discussing long, long retaining walls, which is expensive. So again, here's another private retaining wall. As it gets to Grandview, that's the subdivision on the southern piece of this. It kind of opens up after that. There's not a lot of limitations. The trail would fit very well south of here, but there are no residents on Concord Road south of this.
Right.
So, again, yeah, here's south.
There's no residents south, I mean, there's those, I mean, they're not
There's
city.
subdivisions who are not on Concord Road, so their driveways do not go directly to Concord Road.
They're like
Yeah,
three or four of the homes.
right
straight up.
before Valley Road,
Right
there's a
before
couple
Valley Road.
houses
That's
right there.
County Road. That's a county road.
I think that's further.
I
Okay,
see
so
what you're
that's-
saying.
okay.
Never mind.
Yeah, so this area, I mean, you could get a trail nice, you can see how far off you could get it to the property line, and you could connect it up to our parking lot along the southern, but that's the easier part, and there are no residents there. So, here's the other option.
But that ends our property, like, that's our,
Again,
like,
so here,
city line, okay.
I don't have my little mouse to show you what I'm trying to show. But those 10 homes are the ones that, I would think you would continue to try to provide, call it sidewalk service or sidewalk accessibility. And possibly try to extend a trail on the east side of Concord Road. They would have to cross Concord Road to access it, so you're basically asking people to cross the road twice if they're continuous, and use Shady Lane to kind of come off on the side. This is my personal opinion, I feel like this side is more feasible, but it is extremely more impactful to the people who live on this side of the street, as these are some of the homes that were installed years ago and with very minimum setbacks. So although this might be a flatter area, it's very controversial on maybe trying to get a path through some of these properties, as they have a lot of hardscaping, landscaping, driveways, and the front porches are going to be extremely close to a trail. So I think can I do it with nothing else considered? Absolutely. But I think it's going to be real impactful to those people.
Do we know if these, sorry, I was trying to get the mayor's attention. Do we know if these people even want that? I mean, because they bought their house
Right.
on like a
Yeah,
rural
I know.
road.
Right.
So, I mean, while we think it's a great amenity, and, years ago, I did a lot of road running on this road, and I loved the country road feel of it, but, I mean, we don't want to,
We have options throughout the city that provide some of that. I'm just bringing this up as I'm going through this project, noticing that we have some of these types of things.
Could we put it on the other side of the street?
You already proposed that,
I know.
there's houses on both sides.
but it's, the other side of the street's more hilly, I
I
think.
mean, and
The
what
other
if,
side, the other side of the street is going to be way more expensive.
what if
Okay,
6
because
of
we
the
gotta
people say they,
cut that.
You got to cut it down, and you got to build a retaining wall for over a half a mile.
Okay, yeah, I kind of figured.
Alderman
sounds
Mulder?
like a lot of money.
Could we widen the street there to provide a wider bike lane?
So this is how I look at bike lanes. I feel like as you are trying to address motorized people for recreational purposes, you have two groups. You have your bikers, road bikers, who ride their bike on roads all over the place. And then you have your more pedestrians, your moms and strollers and kids and such. I feel like bike lanes are great for road bikers, not good for moms and strollers. So yes, we could extend a bike lane in this area for a cost, but I don't know that we're addressing picking up the residents and trying to provide them sidewalk. So That'd be what I'd be looking at.
You're looking for feedback, I'll share mine. I don't think we should put a path on either side of the road here. The cost
I think it's
benefit
gonna
doesn't
be-
seem to make any sense to
I
me.
concur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just try to sum this up, because I want to be clear as why I choose not to do anything in this particular case is, yes, reconstructing from Allen to the bridge. We could provide a better section out there, better protection for the trail, maybe even put a sidewalk in there, but yes, it would be an additional $1.5 million. We could extend the trail further to the south to help those 10 residential areas and others utilize that area. But, you know, you're looking probably another $1 million.
Alderman Altman-Cloth.
Going back to what you said about strollers and kids.
Yeah.
Chances are, if you have a young family, you're not gonna buy a road on, or buy a house on that road.
Right.
You're gonna get yourself into a neighborhood, or somewhere that has, you know, sidewalks and accessibility and.
What's for sale?
Well, no, true, especially in this community, but, yeah, it's just the thought. I think and then Matt Mulder pretty much said the rest of what I wanted to say, as usual.
Chess.
Yeah, I just wanted to, be clear, like, this wasn't about 10 people who live on Concord Road. This is about all the people who live on Grandview, the River Highlands,
But
all of
remember,
those people that don't have connectivity to downtown and a way to walk downtown.
I don't know if
So
that's true.
They have connectivity.
You know, they
through-
do have, the Shady Lane.
I said
the Hickory-
Grandview. I said Grandview.
So
Grandview
Grandview
Avenue,
can
right
still
on the other
act-
side of the road.
They can still
River
access,
Highlands,
they can still
Riverdale.
access the trail system up on Allen
Right,
through the
you're-
neighborhoods.
Right, you're adding, an extra like mile of walking. Look, I don't support putting
Yeah.
the sidewalks there. I think you laid out a good reasons as to why it doesn't happen, but someone who's done a lot of doors back in those neighborhoods, who's talked to a lot of the people who live back there, they have problems with getting downtown and having connectivity. So that's why we brought it forward. That's
Okay.
why we asked about it. We appreciate you doing that. It's, in a perfect world, we would do it, but it's, we got to deal with
Yeah,
the
if we were
constraints that
building-
we have.
If we were building the city
Right.
out, we
And
would
so
not have
I
put
think there's
concrete in
very
like that.
reasonable, explanation as to why it's not possible.
I'm not sold on us abandoning the pathway there. If you look in the right-hand corner of this photo, you've got all this other development going in. I don't know, they're probably gonna connect through somewhere else, but what about those folks too in the future if we don't have, bike paths or what?
Path on Valley that they're putting through.
Yeah,
It takes you to Oconomowoc Parkway.
yeah. I used to live right on Grandview. I was in the district before I moved out to the Paps Farms, and we would go, if we wanted to walk on that sidewalk, we would end up having to, basically, we walk through the subdivision on that path and then get over to the sidewalk on Allen. It wasn't bad. It was, probably felt safer doing that than walking on that other path on Concord, to be honest with you, because it was just quieter neighborhoods that nobody traveled through at all, except the people that live there.
I like off-street trails. I think they're great, but
Yeah. You don't think the cost is worth it, though?
I don't.
So you've come back and given us more input, so thank you very much. Do you have questions for the council, or does council have further questions for Mr. Herzog?
I'm taking it that we
Because
are
you've
good,
seen this summary.
good with rebuilding Concord Road, just the road itself, with some minor improvements that are necessary.
Well, I'd really like to see that one piece taken care of right over by the river.
Just coming off the bridge there,
That is correct.
I'm on board with that.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Okay.
Thank you, council. We'll move on to our next item. We're running a little bit behind on our timeline, so just kind of a heads up for anyone that's come for the council meeting, we're not going to start at 7:30 sharp. We still have 2 items that we need to go through. Our next item is review and discuss Class B liquor license. We postponed that at a last meeting, and I think we need to make sure that we have that discussion that we wanted to have. Any objections from council for continuing on? Hearing no objections, Ms. Conan.
Thank you, Mayor. So over a month ago, council had requested that we review and discuss our Class B liquor licenses and how we issue them. I believe that was the gist of what the discussion should be. I will tell you right now that the city has 9 reserve Class B licenses available. right now, and on January 1st of 2024, we will receive another one, so that'll make 10. So the city has 10 available licenses for any future businesses that require that. So that puts us in a good position. I will also say that Pabst was issued 8 special legislation licenses just for the former TID 3 boundaries. And right now, they have issued 3 of them, Badger Burger, Dock Hounds, and El Jimador. So that leaves them 5. I know potentially they, the Nicholas Group is in their proposal that they brought forward, they were showing 2 full-serve restaurants, so that potentially could speak for 2 of them. I don't think the 2 fast foods would potentially want those, but we don't know what those businesses are. Also, Momentum Daycare on Blue Ribbon Drive is building a larger building, and the plan right now is to have one part of that building as a wedding venue. So they would be looking for a liquor license. So if those 3 do come to fruition, that would leave Pabst with 2 of their special legislation licenses. But again, we don't know if those will come forward or not. With the new builds, and a lot of this would be new builds, we are finding that it's taking much longer to get that, their business built. And as I've said before, there's delivery issues and there's out of stocks, things like that. And so typically we've been granting the license, giving the business owner 30 days to get occupancy before I would issue the license. The last 3 we found, it's taking much longer than that. And so I've asked for 45 days, and then I've asked for 60, but I don't even think 90 days is unrealistic. And so I think if council wants to have that discussion for when we bring these licenses forward, especially for new builds, what does council really want to see with that? I'd hate to keep bringing a licensee back every 30 days when there's no way that they're going to be able to, get that accomplished. I also want to be fair to the new business and make them feel that they have assurances that if they put all this time and money into the business, they're going to have a license at the end of the day. And we aren't putting them on hold. So, that might be something we'd want to look at. We will have 10 of them available as of January 1. So do we want to, entertain putting a few on hold when a new business comes forward and giving it 6 months, and then if they're not ready, or giving it 3 months or whatever time frame they're asking for. So that's just something I think council really needs to decide, so I know how to bring licenses forward.
So I want to open up discussion on that issue, because that's one of the issues we had talked about previously, and open it up for a discussion. And if you could give staff direction, that would be great. Jennifer Altman-Cloth.
The 60 to 90 days, I'm completely on board with. I mean, just, my husband works in the trades, and I understand that, nothing is going like it did 3 years ago, and it is rough. It's very hard. And then watching, even like most recently, like with Links and Drinks, a great local family that, have a great vision for a business, but then, what if we don't get it, and then we're dealing with this? So completely on board. I'd be on board with 90 days. What you said about holding license for 6 months, my gut reaction on that is I don't think that would be something I would be in favor of, because I think that could open us up to, well, I really like so-and-so, like the Pars. They're friends of ours. Oh, I really like Scott. Yeah, sure, we can hold this for 6 months and see how it goes. But then, Ellis wants a, liquor license, and, I don't like him, so then I'm like, he can just come in the normal way. So I think that opens I don't like that. And I was kidding when I said about Ellis. I was just using him as an example.
Any other comments? Alderman Rozak.
Yeah, I think 90 is too long. I think what we encourage with the hold or the 90 days is for people to come in way ahead, get the liquor license if they're running out, and then promise to get a business open in time. So I think we should just leave it up to your discretion up to 60 days and just leave it at that. If they need more time, we could have them, they can come back and ask for more time. You know, they could come back and ask for another 30 or 60 days, but I don't think we want to keep these things out there forever. 10 seems like a lot, but, you know, if we boom, 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 things start getting
Gone
built.
fast.
It can go fast, and I don't think someone who leases a space and comes in and promises the sun, moon, and stars should get that hold that long. So I would say 60 days, and if they need more time, they could come back and ask for it. That way we have some control. That was the problem before, is zero control over its liquor licenses at Pabst Farm. So that's just my thought.
Alderman Ellis?
I like the 60 to 90. The problem that I see out there is when a business is opening up, a lot of the infrastructure and the building is out of their control. There's got to be time when somebody comes in and builds a wall. Oh, we need electricity in that wall now. Well, we can't see that guy for another 2 weeks. Well, can we do anything? Well, you can't do anything until we get this done. So there's that dynamic of having to wait, and that waiting is out of your control. There's nothing you can do. So if we issue a license and then 90 days later they're not open, 9 times out of 10 it's probably not their fault while they're not open, because trust me, when you got money on the line, you want to get open as quickly as you need to. So, you know, even if we went on even longer, understanding, especially the market the way it is today, and the fact that, you know, unfortunately, people don't really want to work, okay, especially around hunting season. Okay, when I opened up Parker's Place, I wanted to open up in August, and I had to hold because everybody was going to go hunting. That was a culture shock to me.
Wisconsin, New York.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
I'm not opposed to the 90 days. If I put myself in their shoes, I think if I only had 60, I'd be feeling pretty nervous, especially if I'm one of those last licenses going out the door, like the 8th, 9th, or 10th. So I'm not opposed to the 90 days at all. And I agree with Alderman Ellis that, you know, if you're sitting there trying to open up a business, you're not trying to delay this any longer than possible, because you want to get in business, you want to start making money, you want to start putting that license to use, so.
Any other Alderman comments? What I'm hearing is beyond 90 days probably is not favorable in anybody's wheelhouse. So what I'd recommend is that we move on to the next item and ask any alderman if they want to switch it from where it currently is at 60 days to let Mark Fry know, and if 2 of you want to do that, we'll bring it on for a vote to council.
Do we need a motion?
No, this is just a discussion item.
That's what, we have been doing 30 days. I
60.
work with the applicant, but the last few, I have asked for more time.
Right.
On a case by case.
Right, case by case, because we haven't had a lot of new builds prior to this. Now we're getting new builds, and I see more new builds in the future. And so we just want to get on the same page. It would still be, if council approved the license, I would not issue it, so they technically don't have ownership of the license until occupancy is given, and I never know when that'll be, because that is the building inspector. And once occupancy is given, then I can issue the license, because they will open. It just may be a matter of a week or 2 weeks, or, you know.
When I think what council's saying is they want something consistent
Right.
that's fair for everybody.
Right.
And so I think if anybody would like to bring this back on the council agenda with a proposal to move
I
forward.
was simply confused because you said 60 days while it's currently 30 days.
30.
So
Our
you're
last
saying
one,
if
we-
anybody wants to extend it beyond
30 days, correct.
talk to Mark,
Yep.
buddy up system, get it
We
on
can
the
put on
agenda
the-
and
get
move
on
that
the
forward,
agenda.
whether you think 60 or 90.
Correct.
If none of us feel strongly, then nobody takes action. So if you want it moved,
Correct.
take action.
Well said.
Thank
So
you.
do you need 2 of us to say
Hmm?
to Mark? Do you
This
need 2
point?
of us to say to Mark?
If you want, if 2 of you want to do
So
it now, it's
Kevin and
fine.
I will say, let's move, let's get this on a future agenda.
Sounds good. But we need to know what,
For 90.
we need
For
to know
90.
we need to know what your recommendation
For
is
90.
for the memo. Okay,
Case to 90.
cool.
Well-
Good.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Diane. Let's move on to discussion overview of the 2024 budget proposal. Ms. Sullivan Murray.
Just in case, I'm going to talk a lot.
188 slides?
Not that many, but, oh, here they are down here.
Wasn't that the
But there's
joke
a
that-
few.
Wasn't that the joke that Bowen played?
And
the other
for
day?
the audience, when this presentation is over, we'll be closing the committee of the whole and then moving on to start the council meeting. So it's probably going to be about 30 minutes is a ballpark
Yeah, we're
guess.
running overtime
We're
just a
running a
little
little
bit here,
late.
so this is gonna cut into the beginning of the council meeting, but with that, we should probably just get started. Now, what I wanna do tonight is give you a decent overview when you're getting your books, so that you get a good chance to take a look at, the foundation of this budget. What's in there, what decision points are there, that kind of thing. So we're gonna be going through that. The annual budget, we do this every year, and the purpose is for the city, the council, to decide the level of services that are gonna be offered to the public and how to fund those services. End of the day, end of the budget, we set the property tax levy and the mill rate. The budget books will have all of the different funds from the city. The general fund, our big operating fund, special revenue funds, debt service, capital projects, and internal service funds. I'm gonna spend most of my time tonight talking about the general fund because that is our biggest operating fund. Our second workshop will include the other smaller funds. So, general fund budget for 2024. When we start putting the budget together, I'm clicking and nothing's happening. Thank you. So when we start talking about the budget, one of the very first things we talk about is revenues, because we need to know what funds are available for our operations and for our capital projects. So for 2024, there's a few different revenues available that we haven't had before, so I'm going to go through those a little bit for you. The first one we have, net new construction, and that's one that you hear every year. The ARPA funds, I want to review how we're using them, how we have used them, what's going to be used in 2024. This year we have the additional shared revenue. We talk about fund balance and how we're going to use fund balance to offset some of our budget. Let's talk about those fire referendum reserve dollars. How much is there? What are we planning to use it for? And then surplus revenues from 2023. Now, the biggest surplus revenue from 2023, and I've talked about this a couple times before, is interest. So I'm going to show you what we're expecting for the end of the year. So we look at the city funding sources. There's all kinds of funding sources there, but what can we really use for operations? So the first graph is really the city funding source just for operations. And as you know, our biggest funding source in that is property taxes. This year, I put this chart up here for you because this year intergovernmental aid, so state shared revenues, transportation aids, those kind of things, actually went up 2%. So it's 14% of our budget instead of 12%. Increase in shared revenue, that's the additional shared revenue, that $442,000. And then this year, we also have an increase in our transportation aids of about $128,000. Again, like I said, our biggest one, property taxes. So the first revenue we'll talk about is net new construction or the levy itself. And as you know, the state of Wisconsin has the statute, the law that says the levy can increase 0% or your percent of net new construction. Net new construction is really measured as a percentage of growth against our equalized value. Okay? So any other changes to the levy include your annual debt service payments. If you have any annexations into the city, TIF closures or referendums, that's really about the only ways that you can change what your levy amount is going to be. So for this year, net new construction, basically it's growth from 2022 that is measured on January 1st of 23 that we use for net new construction for the budget for 24. So there's always a lag to this, okay? So in 2022, our growth was $120 million, and that translates to 3.82% net new construction, or a levy change of about $504,000 for the operating budget. I think what's kind of interesting when I look at this chart is the last time that we had 3 something for net new construction, it only took us $80 million worth of value to get there. So as our city grows, and it's been growing a lot, we've gone from 1.8 billion in equalized value in 2014 to 3.7 billion in 2024. And a lot of that has been over the last 5 or 6 years. So when we look at this, the higher our equalized value, the more building or net new construction has to happen before we get that 2 or 3%, okay? Second funding source that I wanted to talk about was the ARPA funding. I just wanted to do a quick review. The city was awarded $1.77 million in ARPA funds, and then below is basically how we have put the money to use. $700,000 in lead lateral replacements. We spent $1 million over a couple of years for equipment, trucks, loaders, that kind of equipment, and then the remaining $77,000 to replace, which is going to be happening in the next month or so, the carpeting in throughout City Hall. Excuse me. So in 2024, the last of the funding, the last $400,000 is already accounted for in our capital plan. The next, on the screen, the next source of funding is that additional shared revenue. So $442,000 is what a Commonwealth was awarded in additional shared revenue. And you've heard me say it one time, I got to say it again, because this never happens. Sustainable revenue. This will be here year after year. So that means if you want to use parts of that for operating, you can, because it's going to be there every year. And as we talked about earlier, a couple of council meetings ago, 2 additional, excuse me, employees, 1 additional full-time DPW crew, and then the city's portion of the utility locator fleet position, about $117,000 is what is planned to use out of that 442 for the 2024 budget. That leaves $325,000 for the council to discuss and look at and decide how do they want to put that money to use, okay? So the staff, recommendation, the things that we've been talking about with you and with each other is that the recommendation is to use that $325,000 on a one-time use. If you do that, if you use it for capital, if you had decided to do more work on Concord Road, you could have used it for that. The other thing you could use it for is to reduce the amount of debt that we're going to issue for Concord Road, okay? Any other capital projects, things that are one-time, basically what that does, it preserves that $325,000 for decisions again next year. That you can, if you're deciding that you need another police officer, or we need an IT person, you can use part of those dollars for that, and then the rest for capital or a one-time thing. Basically, you would be able to spread those dollars over couple, 3 years before it's completely incorporated into the operational budget. Then we've been talking about the fund balance and the amount of fund balance we have in the reserves right now, and how are we going to use that? How are we going to reduce that dollar amount? So the fund balance, unreserved fund balance, basically, if you want, where we're at right now, just about $10 million, okay? So 5.2 of that is our 25% of expenditures, or committed amount that we keep for extreme emergencies. We keep it for our credit rating. We don't spend that. The rest of the unreserved fund balance is nearly $5 million. So what do we use that for? Just so you know, we're on the same page here. We do use that for unexpected or emergency expenses, bigger sorts of budget amendments that may happen throughout the year. It's used for our credit rating. We also use this for advanced funding for projects. So like if you're gonna start working on Concord Road and I don't borrow the money today, it's gonna be 5 months from now before the money comes in, but we have bills to pay, we advance fund, reimburse ourselves when the funds come back in. We use it for impact fee projects for parks or streets, so that those monies are coming in. As they come in, they reimburse the general fund, but we've paid for them up front. Currently, we're using about $861,000 worth of the fund balance for these projects. Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So am I correct then, there's 4.9 million in balance, but that's not actual cash we have, because some of that is actually the 861,000 that we're waiting to receive that will go in.
Yeah, so it's counted as fund balance in the general fund, but then at the end of the year, any fund that is, basically, there can't be any fund that has a negative balance.
Okay.
So those reserves have to cover any negative balances. The only time we ever have negative balances is in impact fee funds,
Right.
and occasionally the beginning of a TIF fund if we've fronted money before we borrow money, or before the before the increment comes in.
Okay.
But yes, so it would be 4,944,000 less that 861 right now,
Is
what the
Cash
actual
on hand,
balance
kind of, yeah.
of cash on hand is, yep.
Yep, thank you.
And then currently, we are looking at one-time capital purchases and projects. So in 2024, we have planned to use $600,000 of fund balance for capital needs, and that's in the capital budget that we talked about a couple of months ago. And then we use it for cash flow as well. The city's funding comes in lumps of money that has to be spread out over time. So generally, we're really not using a lot of that for cash flow, but it's there so that if we didn't have it, we may be in a position sometimes where we would have to short-term borrow operational expenses, and we don't want to be there. Or we don't want to have a line of credit to rely on. We've got enough fund balance that we don't have to do that. The one thing that we never ever do with fund balance is use it for operations, because it's not sustainable funding. Operations always has to be reoccurring revenues. So the fund balance recommendation, basically we already talked about this at the capital budget. For 5 years, the plan in the capital budget is to use between $400,000 and $600,000 of fund balance to offset capital needs.
Out of curiosity, every year, we typically put money into the reserve fund anyway because of overages in the regular budget.
Yep.
So while we might be using 400 grand this year, 600 grand next year, we might be putting in another 120.
That's exactly
150
right, and that's why we have to look at that every year to see what that balance is and decide how much you want to use in the next year. So then the fire referendum. So in 2022, the referendum amount that was approved to support the fire response times and staffing was $2.2 million. In 2023, they used 60% of that fire referendum in their budget, leaving 40% to be deposited to a fire reserve. In 2024, they're using 80% of the fire referendum, so another 20% gets deposited to the fire reserve. In 25, they'll be using 100%. So the total amount of the reserve will be $1.446 million. So we talked during the referendum process that we could use this money and spread it over 10 years to help us with capital expenditures. And another reason why that's a really good idea is because when we first formed Western Lakes, we had an ambulance fund. And we've been using between $100,000 and $150,000 a year of that to offset capital. This is the last year, and that ambulance reserve money is gone. So we, instead of that $150,000 coming on our levy right away next year, we can use the fire reserves here and spread that out over about the next 10 years to just continue funding about $150,000 a year. I know that, it'll earn some interest and stuff, so we'll spread it out and we'll see how it works. Generally, what we'd want to do then is when it gets closer to the end of the 10 years, we probably want to start weaning ourselves off of that a little bit. Maybe $50,000 a year for 3 years that we're moving down, so it doesn't take a big $150,000 hit to the levy all in 1 year.
But only, so it's clear for anyone watching, only for fire,
Only for fire.
right? We can't use that money for anything else.
Correct. And that it would only be for the fire capital. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the surplus revenues from 2023. So, and I've only got a couple of them on here, and but these are the bigger ones. Interest revenue, like I said, is huge. We're looking at an expected almost $800,000 in interest revenue that we didn't budget for at the end of the year. And permit revenue's coming in higher than normal too. So we're looking at probably $75,000 on that. You're gonna see some other things, normal budget things where, we might have had a vacancy for a while or something. I don't wanna bank on that for what we're looking at here, but these are revenues that I know are gonna be there for you. And what I was hoping, you got, I guess I could go to the recommendation slide, because you got two choices. You could take all that money and shove it back into fund balance, or we can take a look at what some of the needs are right now and make a budget amendment or carry forward some of this for 2024. Now, one of the things that we don't have in the capital budget right now is the additional snowplow. One of the reasons we need it, we've grown so much. We need another snow route. So that's why that's up there. Another thing that has been a topic just lately is the emergency weather sirens. I think you saw that in Mark's weekly report last week. And the cost on that's like 200. I'm not saying we're doing it. I'm saying if you were, this is a place where you could get the dollars from. We talked about pickleball courts. There's Oz Plaza over here. Another funding possibility for Oz Plaza, though, that I want to talk to you about, and we should talk about that in the next couple of meetings, is TID4. Because TID4 is ready to close, but there's about $180,000 of budget left in there, and I can still close it in 2024 even if we do this project. And I think it makes a lot of sense to do that, and then you can get donations or whatever for the rest of the funding. But it's just things to be thinking about and things that we have to talk about between now and adopting this budget, how you want to use these surplus revenues. Can they be used for operations? No. Just like when we talked about it, the fire district, you can't use the surplus revenues for operations because then you'll be in that much of a double hole the next year if you do, because they're not sustainable. So the revenue overview, and I've got all this written down for you, but are the dollar amounts that we talked about and some decision points that we'll have during our budget workshops. So then let's take a look at expenses. So I have for you in your book both expenses by department, which is how we normally look at them, but a lot of people always also ask about expenses by type. So like across the whole city, how much is operating supplies or how much is wages? So we have that put together for you this year too. As a matter of fact, we'll start with type. So if you look at the different types of expenditures that we have, wages and benefits, purchase services, operating supplies, maintenance, those kind of things, and just kind of take a look at how much do we spend on those things. And as expected, and as we've talked about many times, the biggest part of that is wages and benefits because we're a service organization. We don't make widgets here. Purchase services is our next highest one, and that includes, just so you know, $3 million of that is the fire department because they're a purchase service. They're not a department, okay? And that also includes other professional services. Okay, so one of the things that I also did here, just so you know, wages and benefits, that's our biggest expense. It's also the biggest % increase in the budget. But if you put that aside and just look at everything else operationally, our budget, operation budget increases this year just by 2.28% over last year. The bigger part of the increase is going to be personnel, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is when you look at expenditures by type and the percentage of the whole budget, one of the things that you can see is it does stay pretty steady. You're going to see a little bit of change in this year, and that's because of the fire referendum and it upping the purchase service number. But otherwise, for this budget in 2024, the reason that this increases a little bit more than usual is because we added a police officer last year, and we're adding a DPW guy this year. So that changes that percentage just a little bit. But typically, most of these expenses are pretty stable across the city. You gonna ask me now?
I have lots of questions, but I'll ask.
Okay. Okay, now if we look at expenditures by department. So I've got it all separated out here, 23 budget, 24 budget. This is the amount of change. This is the percentage change and the percent of the total budget. So when we take a look at what are we spending our money on, 48% of all the expense is public safety. So between fire and police, 48% of our total budget is public safety, with 19, almost 20% being public works, and then parks, and then library, and then little economic development and planning department here. So that's how we spend our money. When we take a look at that dollar, for every dollar of every tax dollar spent, we spend 30 cents of it on infrastructure. Now that's the big stuff. That's your big parks, that's your streets, that's your buildings, that's the big stuff. Then we spend the next 34 cents on police and fire. And then you've got 13 cents for public works and 8 cents for parks and 5 cents on the library. I don't think I've showed you that part before, so I just thought that'd be kind of interesting to do. And I'll show you how the whole tax bill breaks out over services too.
The 14 cents on fire, that's with the referendum?
Yep. This is a total cost. 14 cents of every dollar, yes. Okay. So major changes in this budget or changes in expenses and revenues. So revenue increases, sanitary district license fees, 32,000, that's our 4% that we get every year, plus any additional RACs. The shared revenue, I already talked to you about, 442, 117 of that's in the budget. Transportation aids are up, interest income is up, and net new construction. Expenses, in the budget, we have 4% COLA. Health insurance was a huge amount this year. We have never seen it be this high. When we first put this budget together, I had 8% in here, and then as we heard a little bit more, we changed it to 12%, and then it came in at 14.9. So that was a little unexpected. Last year, we budgeted 8%, it came in at 4.6%. And you know how much inflation went up last year? So that was a little surprising. So when we got the numbers from the state and really got the details, part of it is, what the state did is they do a 3-year contract with insurance companies. So we paid a little less last year. That increased what we're going to pay this year, but for the next 2 years, the contract with the state shows that our increase won't be more than 5.7% a year for the next 2 years. So that was the negotiations that they worked out. In the budget, like I said, we've got the new DPW crew person, the locator, fleet charges, $106,000 increase on maintenance costs on the equipment this year. Workers' comp insurance up $28,000, and then, of course, the $116 that we approved in the levy for the fire budget last week. I put 12% in the budget. When it went to 14.9, it increased another $45,000. What I'm recommending is use of the health reserves that we have. Honestly, I've talked to everybody. Nobody's been here long enough to know how that ever got started. It's just a little chunk of money that's sitting in reserves. I think in 2019, we used a little piece of it because there was a double-digit increase, which is the last time there was a double-digit increase in our health insurance. So basically, the recommendation is to use $45,000 of that. The amount in the fire reserves right now is $121,000. Let's see. There we go. So the budget process itself, this is a process that's been going on for a couple of months. The department heads are the first ones that take a look, go through their budgets, decide what they need for the next year, and submit it to finance and the city administrator to start with. This is the budget numbers that came in to us to begin with. So then when Mark and I start looking at it, the next thing is to take that and take a look at reality. And honestly, the department's put together a good budget. They know better than to ask for more. What we're trying to do is maintain services. They've always been given the direction that we're not in a position to increase services, but we're trying to make sure we're maintaining services. But when we take a look at it, basically, like I said, the health insurance projection was too low, so I had to add money for that. And then when we take a look at what net new construction is and the other revenues, basically the original proposed budget was $248,300 over the available levy in the general fund. So then Mark and the mayor and me, we start looking at it and we start working with department heads. And so the next step really is adjustments. So how do we get there? We work with all the departments to identify, what do we really need? What's trend? What can we cut back a little bit on? And at the end of the day, we come up with about $50,000 in revenue adjustments and $198,300 in expenditure changes. So when we put that together, here's the department request. You're going to be able to see this. Here's what it got changed to. So this is the amount that got changed in every department before we get the proposed budget going. So to get all together, $248,300. Then between doing that and getting it to you, other numbers tend to come in. Go ahead.
You gotta go back to that last slide
Yep.
and explain that again. You lost me there. The 2024 department request changes. So,
Oh, I don't know why that says 23, I'm so sorry.
so I'm confused.
Okay, so this was the 23 budget.
Right,
This is the 24 department request.
okay.
This is the changes that were made, so between the city administrator and me, we
Gotcha.
went from here to here, and this is the amount of change. So you can see the amount of change that each department took in these adjustments.
We don't want to call them cuts,
Adjustments.
adjustments.
We adjusted their request.
We adjusted their request down a little.
I want to be clear with that.
And Lori, where did the 50,000 in revenue change
Yeah,
come
and
from?
so what we did is we changed, it was 30,000 in interest revenue and 20,000 in the permit revenue. Those are always conservative numbers. Looking at trend and what we've been doing, we felt it was okay to up those a little bit.
And are there any changes in pilot income?
Yeah, and that's incorporated into the budget already.
Okay.
So, yeah, altogether, that's about $57,000 for next year. Okay, so then, the final changes are in the budget books that I'm gonna give you. There was, that extra 2% health insurance change. And end of the day, the total change from 23 to 24 is 5.08%, with 2.28% of that being just operational, and the, over 3 there for the. So bottom line, now we get to calculate the mill rate. How do you calculate a mill rate? You take the total levy needed and you divide it by the total assessed value in the city. So in 2023, our latest tax bill, our mill rate was $5.11 this last year. Next year, it'll be $4.77. But the average home also went from $350,000 to $400,000. So our assessments increased 14.5% this year, okay? Now, our equalized value, the state raised all of our values by 18%. So we didn't go quite as high as the state did this year, but it's still 14.5%. And what I've got to say is I'm really glad we're doing this annually, because can you imagine how far behind we would be getting if we didn't do it for 3 years right now? And if we do it annually too, next time, if this ever starts to ratchet back down, we'll be able to take advantage of the ratchet back down right away as well. So anyway, what we're looking at here, city taxes on a $400,000 home is 400 times 477, or 1,909. So that tax change is $120 on an average home. This is how I usually show it to you, so you can compare it right across the line. Mill rate goes down, the average increase is about $120. $23 of that is for the 2024 debt service, the debt issue that we're doing.
Mayor, I
Sure.
lost you on why we should be thankful we're doing an annual reassessment. Can you explain again why?
If we get too far away from what the state has already, like they did 18% this year, we did 14.5. The farther away we get from that, the farther away we are from the equalized value, the state will require us, to do a reval. And then what will happen is, what happened to me in Waukesha, is that your home will be reassessed at 60% more than it was the year before, because of all of the change over the years. This way, right now, we're doing about 12%, 12 to 14%. I think one year was a little bit like 11, and then it was 12, and now it's 14. Otherwise, you would take that all in one
I'm
year.
losing you because it seems like we still had that huge jump. It just, happened over 2 years instead of 1, so I'm not really sure, the difference.
Lori, why don't we address that in more
Yeah, we're almost-
detail? No, address that in more detail in the first workshop, because I think it's a key point.
I can do that. It doesn't really change what your tax bill's gonna be. It changes what your mill rate is. If your mill rate is below 5 mills like ours is, that's one of the things, we sit in a good place here. Our mill rate, 477, it's a low mill rate. It attracts people to our area. If you're in Waukesha, it's over $6 per thousand, not $4.77. So, it changes. Here's what I wanted to show you. The breakdown of city service costs for your average $400 home, $400,000 home. So that $4.77 mill rate breaks out across the different services with the total bill, $1,909 or $908 for the year. That's an annual bill that you get. So last year, $1,789, $149 a month for all the city services. 2023, $19.08 for the year, $159 a month on city services. So about a $10 increase per month on all of the services that you get from the city. I don't think we have a lot of other bills that have only gone up $10 a month.
I don't know, my internet service went down, so.
Your internet service went down. Did you get a
I
deal?
I call and renegotiate it.
There you go.
Um,
So,
One point, though, that
Yep.
I think this is the first year I've seen, at least in my memory, where we're showing the new mill rate, but we're showing a higher value home because of our increase. Usually, we say, we've been consistent. 2023, 2024, the average home value is 350, 350.
yeah, actually I haven't. Ever since we started the assessments, I've changed it to the assessment amount.
Well, and I think that.
And I
this-
have
you
to,
had a
No, I
to
think,
show
Lori,
the real change.
This topic, we need a few examples in the
Yeah.
workshop.
Sure.
Because I think it's something that our council really needs to dig into for clarity.
Sure.
Well, and it's a
If-
good.
Is that what you guys
Yeah,
would like?
absolutely, because I'll get calls from constituents that
Yeah.
said, well, my taxes went up. I said, well, mill rate went down. Well, what did your house go up? Your house was reassessed and your value increased 50 grand, so of course your taxes went up even though the mill rate went down. So when we show these numbers, it would be nice to say, hey, if your house was still only worth 350,
Yep.
you actually would have a tax reduction because of the overall increase of assessed
Right.
value.
But the overall
does happen to
increase
some
would
people, right?
include your house too,
Right.
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 So everybody's house changed.
But everybody's house changes at different rates
A
depending
different
on
rate.
how it's assessed.
And that's why we do the average one.
Right.
So the
And I think
average was 14%.
At the end of the day, it's how much did mine go up from the previous year? That's
Yep.
all.
That's all
most
what
And
people
that's all you
care
can
about.
do. You can take your number and you can times it by the mill rate and see what the difference is.
Mark, we can get that done?
So the only thing, what I wanted to say is $120, I know you're not used to, it's one of those things as a politician, I totally understand. It's a little bit hard to take. You don't want to see a tax increase. I can tell you, one of the things that, I understand where you're coming from. When I'm standing here telling you how you have to, work on your net new construction, you need to use it. I'm doing that as the finance director. Mark will do that as the city administrator, because when we're looking at the city's finances, I'm not just looking at next year or the year after. We have to look at sustainable financing. And if we're not using our net new construction, our budget workshops won't be about how do we use these revenues. They'll be about what services aren't we going to provide anymore. And that's what I'm trying to keep us from.
Alderman Mulder?
I know we'll discuss this, but I want to put this out there. Because the complete tax bill went up 5%. So nobody's paying, as a whole, the city is only paying 5% more. Some people might be paying 8, but that means some people's only went up 2. Some
Yep.
people might have went up 12. That means somebody might have went down 3%. So to say everybody's getting this big tax burden is not true. Collectively, as a people, we're getting 5%. Some get more because the value of their house went up. Great, you're going to pay a little more for it, the people that didn't. So we all guffaw. I hear people, oh, we're all rolling our eyes over here. We need to really understand it so we can talk to our constituents about it, because we're not soaking people with more taxes every year. We're not allowed to do that
Right.
legally, and we're not doing it.
Right.
And whether we do an assessment 1 year, 10 years, every 100 years, nobody's paying more. It just, we're
That's not true, though.
equalizing it more. It is.
Some people are getting screwed, and because they're having to deal with it every year. And if the assessor makes a mistake, then those people are getting screwed. And that's happening more often when you're doing in a reassessment.
errors.
All right,
We've
so
had a
we
lot
like-
of errors.
I got to finish this because we got to start a city council meeting, and we'll talk about this next, on the next meeting when we have a budget time set aside. I've just got a few more to get through here with you. So basically, for 2024, what we have presented to you is a budget that balances and actually leaves about $29,000 on the table. We're to the good, 29,000, I guess is what I'm saying. So if there's any little adjustments in here, we've got a little bit of room to go.
With using the 3.8% net new construction.
Correct. Yes, we made $248,000 worth of adjustments to get this to meet the state levy limit guidelines, to give it to you. This budget does not increase, and more importantly, does not decrease any service levels, but keeps the service levels that the citizens are accustomed to. I told you about the health insurance and the $45,000 from the reserve that I included in this budget so that it would balance. And then, and when I talked about this, levy limits, they don't allow us, as you were saying, to increase any more than what that levy limit is. So we live within that. We're not allowed to. If we decrease it, again, it hurts our ability to fund services in the future. Policy decisions coming up, again, those revenue things, these are things that we have to talk about in our budget workshops, the shared revenue, the fire reserves, the surplus revenue. Mostly the shared revenue and the surplus revenues is what we need to make some decisions about. Budget schedule. So tonight, this presentation, October 5th, which is a Thursday, at 6 o'clock, we'll have a committee of the whole budget workshop in here. We're going to go over all the general fund stuff. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, have you, we'll work through departments. If you have specific department questions, we'll work through that. Otherwise, we'll work through your questions and how we get to the budget. In your budget workbook, what I want to show you in your book, tell me when everyone has a book.
Thanks.
You're getting a book, you're getting a copy of my PowerPoint. You're getting a book and you're getting a copy of the PowerPoint tonight. Inside the book, I also, so the PowerPoint's for reference for you. I also have a memo for you that kind of lays out the changes that are in the budget as well. This is for reference. The next thing that I have are the worksheets that I prepare for you to help you with the book, okay? So I have one for the revenues, and it lays out all the revenues with changes. It'll have the dollar amount change, it'll have the percentage change, and if that percentage or that dollar amount change, if that change is more than, if it's at least 5% and more than $5,000, I've got a little explanation there for you. If it's 23% and was $300, I don't have an explanation for it. Okay, it's small. I'm trying to get the main ones to you. So then I also did for you, the one-page one is those expenses by type that we looked at up here, just so you have it, because I know you ask about it a lot. The main worksheet you're gonna use is this expenditure by department. In the expenditures by department, each department is laid out here with their budget types. There's also, in the first column, a page number, okay? So if you want to go to the general accounting page, it says page 74. So in your book, every time we talk about page numbers, if you look at your book, there is a dark number with a dash on both sides. That's the page number, because every time when we print these reports, the computer will print the Parks Department report, and it'll have page 1 of 17, or page 4 of 7. We're not worrying about those numbers. It's the bold number at the edge here. That's where, if you look for page 76, you go in here and you find page 76, and then you'll find the accounting. When we talk about it, when we have questions, you'll use those dark, bold page numbers so that everybody is on the same page. All right, so that's the books. If you have questions about your books or need any help with it, let me know. Questions related to the budget. So you've all got questions in your head right now. If there's things that you can put out there ahead of time so that we're prepared and maybe can have one less budget workshop if we get some of these done, direct all of your budget questions to me and Mark. We'll make sure that they get to the correct department and compile those and get prepared for the budget workshop. If we have questions ahead of time, the departments can prepare to give you the correct answers instead of saying, I'll have to look that up, okay? We can compile it all and make sure that everybody gets the answers then. Everybody gets the complete set of questions and answers. And with that, the only questions I'm gonna take right now is on process or timeline. Otherwise, we'll talk about the rest of them on October 5th.
I have a question on page 396. Oh.
Thank you very much, Lori. There's a lot of work that goes into that. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're going to start the council meeting in 5 minutes. We're going to have a quick restroom break for the council. And thank you, everybody, for waiting, and sorry to keep you waiting as we're running a little bit late. Common Council meeting for Tuesday, September 19th, 2023. Has appropriate meeting notification been made?
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
If you would all please rise if you are able, and we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please.
Alderman Ellis.
Here.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Here.
Alderman Mulder.
Here.
Alderman Shellpepper.
Here.
Alderman Maroney.
Here.
Alderman Douglas.
Here.
Alderman Rozak.
Here.
Alderman Altman-Cloth.
Here.
Council, without objection, I'd like to bring forth a proclamation. We have our guests are waiting, have been here. Any objection? No. Great. I'd like to read this proclamation on behalf of the City of Oconomowoc, something very special. Whereas the City of Oconomowoc has in the past recognized and honored worthy citizens, and whereas William, Bud, and Erla Newbecker will, on September 20th, 2023, that's tomorrow, celebrate 70 years of matrimony, or we can call that 613,620 hours of wedding bliss. And whereas Bud and Erla met in Slinger Speedway in Slinger, Wisconsin, and were married on September 20th, 1953, beginning a marriage that would that would see 70 anniversaries and many changes in this world. And whereas Bud and Erla Newbecker have also made Oconomowoc their home and residing at 843 Armour Road since September 20th, 1953. Wow. Whereas Bud and Erla's legacy includes approximately 100 children throughout the years of their marriage by loving, caring for nieces, nephews, great-nieces and nephews, children of friends and neighbors. And whereas, in addition to caregiving, Bud was employed here at the City of Oconomowoc Street Department and later at the Oconomowoc Utilities Department for a total of 48 years.
Woo.
Wow. Whereas Erla was employed at the Musbeck Shoe Company for 40 years and taught Sunday school at Dr. Martin Luther King Church, Dr. Martin Luther Lutheran Church, and served as a Sunday school superintendent for 30 years. And whereas the Newbeckers contributed to the quality of life of others through their ownership of a taxi stand and business in downtown Oconomowoc in 1960s and the 1970s. Now therefore, I, Robert P. Magnus, Mayor of the City of Oconomowoc, do formally and with personal pleasure recognize and congratulate William, Bud, and Erla Newbecker on their 70th wedding anniversary and urge all who have had the opportunity to acknowledge and celebrate and extend the happiest of anniversaries to them and formally declare tomorrow, September 20th, 2023, as Bud and Erla Newbecker Day. So we have a special proclamation, which I therefore hereby unto set my hand and cause the official seal of the City of Oconomowoc on this 19th day of September, 2023.
Mayor, bring them up and get a picture with you.
Yeah, are you comfortable coming up and we'll do a group picture? Council, can we kind of stand up and stand?
That would be nice, too.
Where do you want us, here?
Just behind Mayor, maybe?
You didn't know we were going to take a picture, did you? What's your favorite memory working?
Oh.
Turn them around. Yep.
Bring the family, and we'll take the pictures.
A loving family.
Doesn't matter. I told him it's fine.
I get this and the. Can you put the flag on there? Ivan.
I don't think it is.
I want to get a little closer in here too. And smile. Everybody else getting pictures? Very nice.
Good for them. Most people don't get that much.
That's for sure.
It's probably gone by then.
45, and real quick, right? 54.
Baby. Gosh.
Thank you.
All right, next up to our first of one public hearings, where it's the conditional use permit, duplex standards text amendment. The purpose of the public hearing, comment for a proposed text amendment to section 17-108, conditional use specific standards, one dwelling, duplex of the municipal code. The text amendment pertains to standards for granting a conditional use permit for duplex structures. If approved, the change allows property owners relief from paying additional impact fees when asking to convert a single-family dwelling into a duplex. If there is documentation that a structure was previously used as a duplex, the Common Council would have the right to waive the fee if they determined that there is no additional impact to the community. Mr. Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In 2019, that'd be 4 years ago, we adopted standards for all of the conditional uses identified in the zoning ordinance. Back then, 4 years ago, we took a stab at creating these standards. We didn't really know, but based on a court case, every community had to create standards for conditional uses that are determined a little bit more intense of a use than what's typically allowed in that zoning district. So we created standards for a duplex when it's in a residential zoning district that primarily is single-family lots. In the, SR zoning is single-family, but you can have a duplex if you get a conditional use. So we created these standards. For the last 4 years, they've been going fairly well. Overall, all the conditional uses. We haven't had too many for duplexes, but we had one some time ago, and the issue of impact fees came up, and it was brought to my attention that, maybe that's not fair. So planning was asked to look at the standards. So I want to just share with you what we had, and the Plan Commission did recommend this. So this will be an amendment to Chapter 17 affecting those standards for the uses. Anything in bold is stuff that I changed, and then the Plan Commission actually made one other change that's underlined, I believe, on here. So underlined in your ordinance. So the dwelling shall have 2 addresses, the site shall provide 2 on-site parking stalls per unit, the dwelling shall have separate access to each unit, the property owner shall pay 2 garbage collection recycling fees, the property owner shall work with city utility department regarding the installation of utility connection meters. Then we get to the big one, the one that we changed. We said if you're constructing a new duplex on a vacant lot, you should pay 2 impact fees. Then if the property owner will be responsible for payment of 1 fee if it's going from single family to duplex use. Okay, good. No impact fee would be paid for the existing dwelling unit if it's changing from 1 to 2. But if sufficient documentation is, as determined by the council, is provided that the structure was previously used as a legal duplex, then the impact fee for the newly approved unit may be waived by the common council, at which time no impact fees would be required. So that's kind of the big change. I don't think I changed the slide. I was going to remove shall have a minimum of 2 separate garages, but in your ordinance, it's updated in yellow, updated with the Plan Commission recommendations. They said they agree that 2 separate garages aren't required because some of these lots in the SR and TR zone they don't have the size to put 2 separate garages, but they said for new construction, each unit shall have a separate garage, and that was included. So I only have 2 slides, and this is just the recommendation by the Plan Commission. They made a motion to approve the ordinance 23-0-1051 to the Common Council, amending these standards for the text amendment for the conditional use requirements for duplexes. I'd be happy to answer questions when this is on the agenda later on.
So this is part of our public hearing. I do not have any requests for comments on this item from the public. Does anybody from the public wish to speak on this public hearing item? With no comments being made, I'm going to close the public hearing. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes for September 5th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we move on to comments and suggestions from citizens. This is a time where you have 3 minutes to share your viewpoints with the council. It's a one-way dialogue. We have two cards. If anybody else would like to speak, please fill out a card. First up is Lou Kavieski. I don't have my timer on.
That's okay. Good evening, council. Thank you very much for allowing me to provide some comment. The 2 words I want to make sure I get out are trust and transparency. I want to talk about Rockwell Park. Rockwell Park, as a passive portage park, is a great asset to this community and really impacts in a positive way the 2 lakes that highlight our downtown can be utilized. But as part of this council that considered that back in 2020, that was supposed to be a passive portage park. The 517 portion of that park wouldn't have even really been a discussion without the very generous donation from Pat Harrow for $600,000 to purchase the 525 lot. And there were expectations associated with that purchase that the city maintain that as close to a natural setting as possible. No structures, very little or no additional cement, no bathrooms, no things that make that a destination park where you're going to spend all day. When we talked about it, it was going to be a path that brings you closer to the water as you do the Fowler Lake Walk. It was going to be part of the charm of that downtown experience. Being part of the conversations associated with the process, because it was a privately fundraised effort to purchase that 517 lot, if you remember, and it wasn't, some people had issue with how it was presented, because it was build a park at 517. And it really wasn't. It was buy a piece of property, which was 517 for $1.35 million. And the community responded and it was purchased. I have some notes from that meeting back in July of 2020, where it set forth some of those expectations, not only in what that park was going to be, but in regards to some of the cost. And the cost associated with that was going to be $150,000 of city money, loss of tax revenue for both parcels. And we didn't know at the time what was going to happen with the 517 residence that was there, that ended up being torn down as the plans continued. There was a lot of discussion if there's going to be a bathroom, if there's not going to be a bathroom, if there's going to be a turnaround, if there's not going to be a turnaround. I believe there's been no final decision from this council in regards to that. I would really request that that be done very, very soon. Trust and transparency are critical elements that council, all of council, and the mayor are responsible for within this community. Some people have expectations for a bathroom. Some people have expectations for no bathroom. The upfront cost, the long-term cost, we just went through your budget for 2024. There's money here and there. But we run a very tight, fiscally responsible budget process in this city. And as a result, I'm asking you to do that with this park, because it's not just the upfront costs, it's the long-term costs associated with some of the elements that need to be decided now for the benefit of this community and for the completion of that park. It should be complete and done in this cycle. I'd rather see, and I've been vocal about that, and I believe this council voted to put the bathrooms that support the downtown activity here behind City Hall as part of Oz Plaza. I see that's part of the 2024 budget. There's $300,000 in carryover money that was associated with the bathrooms to support the downtown that could have been done this year. It needs to be done next year. I hope this council, with trust and transparency, is able to cut the ribbon on a bathroom that supports the downtown events and ability for our community to come together and strengthen the bonds of the existing residents and the new residents as we continue to grow, because this is really where it happens, in the downtown area. So I'm asking you, as you're putting together these budgets for next year and the departments that they are impacting and the community in which I live, to make those decisions next month, next meeting, so staff knows how to proceed, so we as a community know what to expect with trust and transparency. Finally, because there's been a lot of fundraising efforts, not just for Rockwell Park, but other amenities, and I've seen, again, on the budget, with the pickleball court privately fundraised. We've gone through a lot of fundraising efforts for the splash pad. I believe there's maybe still a $5,000 hold line item in the 24 budget for that. We've been waiting on some numbers. We'll be looking to hopefully share that in the first meeting in October, and hopefully if there's some support that's needed there, we can find a little bit of help associated with that. But I want to assure you that if the council is not willing to find some support, we will find a way to make sure that that splash pad is available for the community and our young families to enjoy next year. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Next up is Mark Justman.
I think he left.
I think he left.
He left?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, no problem. Do we have any other comments or for this part of the meeting from the community? Seeing no comments, we'll move on to item 7, our consent agenda items. Council, you have the opportunity to make a motion, one motion, or pull anything out.
Motion to approve all the consent items as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, on to our next item. Protection and welfare, consider act on approving new passenger transportation vehicle license for Thirsty Bird Saloon and taxi driver license for Todd Schiffgren. Diane?
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier, the committee, Protection and Welfare Committee, discussed the application by Todd Schifrin regarding a passenger transportation vehicle license, which is a quadricycle license, and it is basically the Pedal Tavern that has been operating in the city. Todd would be taking over that operation. He's also applying for a taxi driver license, which council would need to approve. Then he would be able to operate or drive the Pedal Tavern. The Pedal Tavern has been inspected by the police department, and it has passed that inspection. Todd, if it is approved, would also have to provide the city with a certificate of insurance, and he would do that once, if council approves that. So we would have everything in place for that operation to start. I was informed that there were 93 events planned or excursions for the Pedal Tavern when council did not take action on September 5th to renew that license. And so Todd would take over those scheduled rides, I guess we'll call those, right? And that would be part of it. There was also discussion at Protection and Welfare to just approve the license through the remainder of the year. I did have in my memo looking to approve it through June 30th, which is our regular licensing period. So council would need to decide, how they want to do that as far as the approval of it. So that's all I
So,
have.
council members, the applicant is here. Todd, do you just want to come up to the podium in case there are any questions? I'd just like to open it up for council for questions, comments, or a motion. Alderman Altman-Cloth.
I have a question. So on other permits, we see the language conditional use permit. That is not this, correct?
That's a zoning term.
Right.
That's more, well, we use it for for example, the triathlon with the lake. That's a conditional use permit. So if they, in a way, it doesn't even matter if we give them the permit to use the lake for the next 100 years. They screw up one time, they lose it. By a different category.
This is not conditional. This is annual.
Okay.
Alderman Maroney.
Todd, how does this work with the lease with Vino and Brian, and then are you taking the lease over? We discussed that earlier, but I just want to be.
We're in discussions with that right now. I guess we're looking to get through the rest of the rides for the 8 to 9 establishments that would like to finish the year out and go forward with this. Like I said, I've had like a week and a half to get this all prepared and together, so I haven't had an opportunity to sit down and discuss that with him, whether he wants to sell or and stuff like that to move forward with it. I do know, like I said, it's in conjunction with the Milwaukee Pedal Tavern, because they hold we're just an additional licensee onto their license.
Yes, but for now, he still has the lease.
He owns the bike.
He owns it,
Correct.
okay.
Alderman Altman-Cloth.
Sorry, again. When I look at the map, so is this green line, kind of right next
If
to the
you're
lake?
colorblind, you can't read that map.
That is true. Are you colorblind?
No, but
Oh,
it's still
okay.
hard to read.
It is very hard to
Just
read.
going blind.
So that's why I'm going to ask a question. Does this go back behind Vino in the boardwalk area at all on this route?
On that route, it does go back there, but only with the condition of if there's a parking spot available for the Pedal Tavern, not in any handicap area or in any loading zone or anything like that.
Because, you had reached out to me this last week, and and I had said to you, I really have no reason to object to this if this is under new ownership. And then today in committee, we find out that it's technically not under new ownership.
Me and Brian are in conjunction with it.
Okay.
Still working on the details of the rest of it.
Because I think part of the problems was how, it's so tight back there
Correct.
behind Vino. And I think that that's a problem, and I don't know if I'm okay with that being back there. The second thing is some of the drivers, and I don't know which drivers are more habitual in riding the wrong routes than others.
To my
Like, would we
recollection, I
have,
believe there was only one
would that
instance where the
person be
Pedal
running?
Tavern was off route.
Okay, would
where
that
it went
person
down
be
Main
driving
Street.
anymore?
What's that?
Would that person be driving anymore?
I don't know who that is. I'd have to look into that. I do know we've come up with a plan with all our drivers and had a meeting that anything that's approved tonight en route and anything that's deviated from is automatic, not able to drive or work.
I think if we can get this out from behind the board, you know, by the boardwalk, I'm in full support, but that's the one thing that you might lose me on.
Alderman Mulder?
Yeah, I find myself kind of in a difficult position on this one. I'm just going to explain. Last time I had suggested that we allow the remainder of the rides to go forward and reconsider. There wasn't any interest on council discussing that because the owner, or Brian, was not here to kind of discuss. And so what you're putting in front of me now is basically the same thing, except now I feel like I'm being played, because the issue is the same as we discussed earlier. You're not, the revenue collecting from this is still going to go to the owner that decided not to show up last time and was in violation. So we're essentially approving what we decided not to approve before. When the license has just gone to a different person, it feels like it's just but yet I was in favor of it before. So I really feel like this is just not the way we should conduct business, right? And this isn't on you. I know you have a business to protect. You know, the revenue is important to you. It's important to all the business owners. But it just doesn't feel like this is the transparency that Lou had just been talking about is not here, right? There isn't any transparency. If we hadn't asked the question, we wouldn't realize that the original applicant was the person still receiving all the revenue. So essentially, we've done nothing by not approving it last time. We just pushed it under the rug. So I don't know how I'm going to vote yet, but I do want to move this to an annual license. I don't think it makes any sense to have this on June 30th. The owner doesn't know. They're going to start booking stuff into July and August, just like now, and not know if they can fulfill those rides. So I don't know what we need to do to make that, but from now on, we need to have this be an annual license. It goes January 1st to December 31st, so that all of the rides occur within the same calendar planning year. If we continue to have this as something that's allowed in the future, which I'm not sure, I'm in favor of, either given the amount of work it's causing the city to try to keep this en route.
Alderman Ellis, and I'm sorry I didn't see you. I saw that.
It's all good. It's all good. Can you assume the loan, and if so, when can you assume the loan? Or the lease, I should say.
From Brian?
Yes.
That's something I have to discuss with Brian yet. As far as a full lease from him,
Right.
that's something that I mean, I would assume whenever, I don't know, I can't even answer that.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Okay, so and I agree with Alderman Mulder's comments, and I don't feel like we're getting clear information. You know, if you're in essentially taking this over, you're not paying the lease. The money's still going to Milwaukee, Pedal Tavern, Brian, whatever. But my question to you is, how did this come about? Did Brian contact you and say, hey, let's try to make this work till the end of the year, or through these other 93 bookings, or how did this come about?
I actually contacted Brian, because in the betterment of the 9 establishments that it helps by him having there, and I think it's a great thing for the city of Oconomowoc to have. So I reached out to him to say, because, you know, there was rumors left and right, why didn't he show up, why didn't he do this, whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
he needed to show up, obviously. My thing was, how would I get this to help the 9 establishments and move forward for the rest of the year? And then an overview to see how this goes in the next 2.5 months for me, to see if it's worth the discussion to take it over, and ask him.
Okay, and what's in it for you besides the revenue that goes to your establishment? I mean, are you going to be receiving any of those percentages of those bookings now that
No,
you're going
that's
to be?
completely between the
Okay.
Pelletera and Brian.
Okay.
This helps our businesses out tremendously on Saturdays, Sundays, when we're, you know, dead and nobody in there, and we bring 12 to 16 people in there every 2 hours, you know, on 4 rides on a weekend.
But you have to pay the insurance on the vehicle.
And we're an additional to the Milwaukee Pedal Tower.
Yeah.
Alderman Rozak.
Chad, thanks for, Todd, Chad, I don't know why I keep calling you Chad, I apologize. Todd, thanks for coming in. A lot of these things aren't really your fault per se, although I do agree with Matt and Karen that we're not getting a ton of clarity from you or how this is gonna work. but I do want to clear the air on a few things. One, Brian did not show up to the meeting, even though he knew about the meeting. He was sent a letter and then had create additional controversy in the city with regard to this. Now, maybe this YouTube video won't get as much play as Facebook posts accusing us of being ninnies for, eliminating the Pedal Tavern and ending people's fun. But let me read the letter that was sent to Brian on September 6, 2023. The City of Oconomowoc Common Council held a council meeting on June 27 to consider the renewal of Vino, et cetera. The renewal came into question due to parking and route deviation violations reported to the Oconomowoc Police Department. However, it was also reported that the police department was working with you to resolve those issues. Council renewed the license conditional through September 5th, 2023, at which time the police department would provide a report and make a recommendation for renewal, and you were to appear to provide any comments or answer questions. Brian was at that meeting and was well aware of the next meeting in September. Next paragraph. At the Common Council meeting on September 5th, a report was made by the police department to renew the license. However, it was also reported there were at least 2 additional violations, including parking and route deviations after the June 27 Common Council meeting. He, again, I'm not going to read the rest of the letter, but he was supposed to be here on the 5th. He wasn't here on the 5th. I told Brian after the meeting he should have come or renewed the license himself, and maybe we would consider why he wasn't here, an explanation. And just so anyone watching the meeting would understand, we ask builders to be here if they're asking for new approvals or zoning changes. We ask people that are asking for a duplex, conversion like we're just talking about tonight to be here to talk about it. If there's complaints, and if there's really, which I find hard to believe, the 97 more scheduled rides this year, that's $37,000. You would think someone would want to be here at the council to answer the few questions about the route deviations and the issues. Tonight, I'm not getting a lot of clarity. I do feel like the wool's being pulled over my eyes a little bit on this thing. I really want to help you, and I want to help the businesses. But I think there needs to be a holistic discussion next year about an annual renewal, whether we actually want these quadricycles driving around the city. And we've expanded the hours as well a couple years ago. So 4 years ago, I was on board with this. I was pushing this. And then 2 years later, we asked for additional hours. I supported the additional hours. But since then, we've had all of these problems. My biggest objection right now to this is the amount of time our police is spending going to route deviation call on the Pedal Tavern, or noise complaints, or parking problems. It's the last thing I want our police doing. I'd rather they'd be out in their patrol cars just driving around than having to figure out whether the Pedal Tavern's on the right route, or have to come to a meeting to talk to us about the stupid Pedal Tavern again. So I don't know what to do. I don't know how I'm ultimately going to vote on this thing. I'm inclined to let you do it till the end of the year, because I think it was cool that you stepped up to help the businesses. But after this, I think we need to have a discussion about the hours, about the entire ordinance, about making it annual, and about whether we're going to have this on Wednesday through Sunday, pretty much, from spring to fall. I think there's a lot to discuss, and it shouldn't be done tonight, though.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
I'm inclined also to see this through to the end of the year. So at this time, I would actually make the motion to approve the passenger transportation vehicle license for commercial quadricycle for Thirsty Bird, however, expiring December 31st of 2023, and the taxi driver license for Todd.
Karen, I'll second that motion, but I'm going to make an amendment to it after, because I had talked about that route issue.
The route,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
going
right.
through Bank 59.
And take it out of
Yeah.
by the boardwalk.
Yeah, and we don't want I don't think we want it behind the boardwalk either, because that's where all the parking issues are
Would
coming
you
into
like
play.
to modify your initial motion?
Sure.
Just trying to simplify
As
things.
said, with the route changes that were expressed by Alderman Rozak.
But those route changes would be pending approval of Bank 59.
Correct. All
And
right.
out of the boardwalk, please.
I agree with out of the boardwalk. I don't think we want it back in
Okay.
the boardwalk.
Out of the board.
And then I think at the time that, before we approve this again, we need to go through a lot more discussion on the hours, the routes, the time this is taking, everything that Alderman Rozak just talked about.
Can we make that an official request from 2 aldermen to put that on a committee of the whole in November to discuss?
Or
Timing, I
December.
can't guarantee, but
Because that's budget cycle.
Okay.
I'm just more worried about timing, bringing it up to committee whole, absolutely. I'm in favor of that. I think that's a good idea. I'm also in favor of having you move forward through the end of the year. I think that's right for the other businesses in town and the people that had faith in our community when they logged in.
I'll second the motion then.
So we have a motion and we have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? It's already second by Rozak. Alderman Douglas.
So with that route change, basically if Bank 59 does not agree, then we're just back at square one with no pedal tavern?
No.
If,
Because you want the route change. Without the route change, we're back at
Good point.
nothing. Am I correct in that?
what I would suggest is that you have the city administrator work, or our staff work with the applicant to try to come up with something that's realistic, and our police chief that will work through the end of the year. And that the goal and the direction is to have it go through the shared private road that the city and Bank 59 own, so that we can reduce exposure to houses and the request along the boardwalk. And so I think we can all pretty much, I would believe, trust that the chief and Mark and our applicant can do that. Are you willing to do that, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that acceptable to the group?
We have to change the motion.
Is that acceptable? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
We need to amend that motion then, because right now the motion is what?
But I think he's saying,
Yeah, I'm just,
Are we fine?
I think you're fine with the motion.
I think we're fine with the motion.
Yeah.
So would this route be approved tonight, or
It'll get
could
approved.
we have our rides as of Thursday, and come Thursday or Friday?
It'll get approved.
Yep. And what, Chief, can you make sure that we get that done? Okay. It shouldn't be that difficult. I just want to make sure we're not making judgments on property that's not 100% ours, or
understand.
that's public roads.
Just so for clarity here, Douglas just, sorry, Mayor, can you call on Douglas?
Alderman Douglas, yeah.
So if he has a ride on Thursday, the current route that is laid out in our packet of the green line, is he fine on that route? Or does he have to do the shared road of Bank 59 that we don't have approval yet for?
We don't have approval. That'll be up to the chief, the applicant, and Mark Fry, because that's only 2 days away. So could it, my thought would be is that they should be able to figure that out sitting down within an hour.
But if they can't,
If they can't,
ride on
then,
Thursday.
yeah, if they can't, then are you
No rides.
comfortable, or do you want to say no paddle tavern?
The way-
I understand your question.
I'm understanding the motion is that
Yep.
he cannot do it unless we get approval from that shared roadway.
contingent on?
Contingent.
Yeah, it's contingent on, I think it should be. I mean,
If that's what you want, that's fine.
we're in this
And
position because of
Changes
what,
the verbiage to contingent on the route change.
So basically, we're putting the pressure on Bank 59 if they say no, no pedal tavern. That's what we're doing.
well, then he can come back and ask for a route change.
When?
Right, but then you have people.
Look, Brian put him and himself in this position. We're the ones that are trying to dig this out and renegotiate a deal, essentially still with Brian, even though Brian's not here. And again, it's not Todd's fault, but, this is on him. He could have come back to the meeting. I told him to come back and reassess the common council, readdress these issues with us, and he didn't want to do it. So instead, he did this back road route with Todd and his group, and that's great for the other businesses, but if they have to come back because the route's not approved, then they come back. That's not my problem. That shouldn't be our problem. We're saying we're willing to reapprove to the end of the year with this minor route change, and they can try to figure it out.
The two road changes.
So we have a motion and a second, and the understanding on that motion is that if there's not agreement to be able to use that road, that they need to come back and try again, which basically takes 2 weeks of business, and they lose that. I'm just looking at the factual part. This is not emotional.
Yeah, right. They've already lost 2 weeks because Brian didn't show up at the last meeting to explain why there were other deviation and problems with this license. This is no different than we would treat anybody else that came in for a license. If we had an alcohol license holder that refused to comply and not continue to check people for underage, or whatever they are doing, we would get rid of their license, with a hearing or whatever, and that's what we're doing here. So, if you have to wait 2 weeks, you gotta wait 2 weeks.
City Administrator Fry.
So, one of the things in looking at that area, the city does own part, we own part of the parking lot, so this was an agreed thing when it was constructed. So there's a potential of a route where they could come from the south up on a city street and then cut through the parking lot on the city part of the parking lot. If we're not able to,
Are you talking about the boardwalk, or are you talking
no,
about?
I'm
by the
talking about the
community center?
campus parking
Next
lot
to
over
the
by the
Worthington.
library. So, I would prefer it to be able to go all the way up the former Church Street, as been discussed tonight. But in the short term, because I don't know how soon we can hear back from Bank 5-9, if we can look at keeping it on city-owned property through there, up through that parking lot and get it up to Wisconsin Avenue that way, would that be acceptable?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Alderman Spiegelberg, do you want to modify your motion to make this simple, so we have one?
Hold on.
Oh, I'll say yes.
Just, you want to add
She's-
that addition to the
Yes.
notes? Okay.
She's got it.
And who seconded it? Matt, are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Alderman, and
But
so
what would the route modification be then to get it out from behind the boardwalk?
they're going to have to figure it out. They can't go back
They
there.
just don't go down
They
there.
don't go there.
It would just be a circle back to Wingers.
Right.
Down
Yeah.
That sounds
Wisconsin
good.
Avenue,
Yep.
over to Wingers
Okay.
for the roundabout.
So
you.
for clarity, I want to make sure those are the two items. I think we have a solution, but Chief, if
Yeah,
we can
so
work.
Basically, you're talking start, stop Wingers, down past Thirsty Bird, right, left on South Street, through the parking lot of Bank 5-9, hang it right up to Wisconsin Avenue right there.
Yep.
Down Wisconsin, hang it right to Wingers, stop.
Chief, are you good with that? So I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We want to help you, and we want to make sure that you fully understand this is not your, this has been brought to you, and you're trying to do something good for
It's
the
been a
community.
short amount of time, there's a little more I wanted to do in this
Yeah.
time, I just haven't had time to do it.
Fully understand. And we're happy to work with you after the first of the year.
Appreciate it.
I'd like to entertain, call roll, please.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Thank you for coming. Next up on the utilities, consider act on resolution 23-R3150, awarding the contract for the number 1 secondary clarifier drive replacement and associated budget amendment.
Oh. I think we made a mistake.
In July of this year, staff found an issue with the clarifier drive. When we did more investigation, we found out that the bearings on that drive unit are shot and they need to be replaced. We went out for, got some quotes from the contractors that can do this kind of work, and
Mark, Kevin, sorry about that. I'm going to have you stop for just a moment. One thing we didn't include in this last is the approval of a taxi driver.
Yes, she did.
It was,
did.
it was,
You
Mayor.
did?
Yes,
It
You
was
did,
in there.
okay. Then forget it.
You can
Go
call
on.
Mark again, though.
Kevin?
there we go. So we got our quotes back, and Crane Engineering for $67,500 would do the work. That is a brand-new clarifier drive, so it won't be a rebuilt one, and it'll have a 3-year warranty. I'm also asking for a 10% contingency for a total of $74,250 in the wastewater reserves.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Freeber?
I make a motion?
Rozak, second.
Any further discussions or comments? Call roll, please.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Next up is what we heard at the public hearing, the consider act on ordinance 23-01051, amending section 17.1081 of the City of Oconomowoc zoning code regarding conditional use specific standards for dwelling duplexes. Council, this is the first reading. So, Mr. Gallo, thank you for your presentations. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Gallo? Mr. Alderman Shellpepper?
No question. I asked Jason and the mayor to bring this forward because of the Leduca decision that we had, the duplex. We basically didn't give him, we forced him to pay the second impact fee, even though, he had said, and he had evidence previously that he had, that had previously been a duplex. It became a single. It went back to duplex. It didn't seem fair. There was multiple members on the council who agreed with that. my thought is if you have a problem with the law, you should change it, if it's, a reasonable thing to do. You shouldn't just complain about it. So that's how it came forward. Appreciate you coming forward. Hope you all support it.
And nice work on it, too, by the way.
thanks
Alderman Rozak?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions about this one, the changes. In G, you have the dwelling shall have 2 separate kitchens. The dwelling is, my understanding, the combined unit, the overall unit, right? The building, okay? And then it says the dwelling shall have a minimum of 4 egress, egress means of exiting. It doesn't say which unit. Is it 2 egresses per unit or 4 just total?
Oh, yeah.
So you could have a duplex that only has 1 egress, and I mean, that's typical in an upper flat. They might only have the one access. But then are we adding some additional, I mean, most houses have a front and back door, and if you have a upper flat, you might have that extra access, but you might not have a third, a third
That's a
door
good point.
downstairs.
The intent is 2 egress per unit.
But I don't necessarily want to do that on the upper flats either, though.
Well, an egress can be a window to a landing area too,
Yeah.
so that qualifies, so it's,
So you'd have to create a landing or a little deck to jump out of?
like on this example up here,
I had to do that in my house.
right here's a window and a landing area, so this would be.
Okay, then,
Yep, a
then,
porch
then,
will do it.
then I think H then needs to be amended to say, each unit shall have a minimum of 2 egress means of exiting, would be the appropriate amendment then there.
So if a motion comes forward, that might be something for you to consider in a motion.
No, I don't care
That's-
about who's got kitchens.
Alderman Ellis?
I'd like to make that motion, and I'd like to amend H to read.
That's fine.
Did
Wait,
you?
you had something else?
No, I've got other stuff.
No.
No, go ahead.
Oh, we still.
No, make that motion.
Okay. What are you saying, Kevin?
I'll retract that until he's done.
Okay.
You can make the motion.
You can
we
make the
still
motion. I
discuss
don't,
it.
I
We
was,
still- we can still discuss
go ahead, that's fine.
are you done with your comments on this first?
On H I am.
On H, do you want to have additional comments?
I do, but I can wait
No.
Okay.
until H.
Make 'em.
Alderman Ellis has retracted his
I've
motion. Alderman Rozak?
One of the things, I appreciate you bringing this forward too, Chaz and Jason. One of my questions when we had the Leduca one was, it wasn't just about it also being a previous duplex. It was also the fact that this person had paid taxes in this house for, at least that was one of my points, is that person had paid taxes in that house for, decades. And then when he tried to use the property in maybe a more, I don't know, cost-efficient way for him, and having the same, basically maybe the same amount of people living in the house, we were now, if you add a duplex to an existing home, so you turn that upper into a flat or something, they will have to pay this impact fee. That's where I thought there was also some unfairness, so that someone who had been paying taxes for decades now has to pay an additional impact fee. I'm open to the suggestion that they still do. I'm just curious what the rest of the council thinks about that issue. The fact that someone's paid for years, they're trying to repurpose an old home. Do we want to put a encumbrance in front of them that, well, now you're gonna have to pay, I don't even know what our impact fees are now, $7,000? 5?
Yeah, I think we didn't require a new connection fee for sewer because this was already connected. So the
Right.
only impact fees was like a new family was coming to the city, so they would impact our parks, which is, I don't know, 3,800 or something. And then our roads and the fire, or not fire, police services. So it worked out to be maybe around $5,000, and he paid it right away in that circumstance, and there was no concern there. But we did waive the utility fees because there was already a connection there.
That makes sense.
But I think the way it's written, that then it comes back to council, because a lot of these are going to be unique situations, is my guess, and very infrequent. But I think these new changes then puts it back onto council to help, you guys can make the final decision.
But it only comes back to us, it had been previously a duplex.
Right.
Correct.
Right, not the situation I'm talking about, it's just, somebody's got a home that's 40 years old that they're trying to repurpose for something, and they want to add the duplex, they get charged that impact fee. We just need to be clear about that.
Yep. Alderman Shellpepper?
Yeah, I would just say to that, though, I mean, then you are like adding, a family to the community that, previously hadn't been there. You're not being grandfathered in. It wasn't a previous duplex. This was a, a single family housing unit that you are now trying to gain more profit off of, or whatever you're, trying to expand, I think it's reasonable to expect an impact fee in that situation. My understanding was, at least this is how I interpreted this council's, concerns was, hey, this had previously been a duplex, it became a single family, it's turning back to a duplex. We didn't have anything on the books, saying basically that, we could waive that impact fee and making it clear. And that's what I was trying to accomplish
Yeah,
with this
no, I think
ordinance change.
that's a fair, I mean, that's fair. I like it.
I didn't have anything to do with any of the other wording, though, but I appreciate you guys bringing this forward.
Would anyone like to make a motion at this stage?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it. And do we need to have the,
And to amend
Change letter H.
to read 2 egress per
Dwelling.
unit.
I have it.
Good.
Yep.
And
second reading?
Alderman
Oh, wait,
Shellpepper?
I also want to waive the second reading, to make this the second reading.
Okay, waive the first reading.
Yeah.
Waive the second reading, excuse me. Did you second it, Jess?
Second.
Alderman Shellpepper seconded. Any further questions, comments? Call roll, please.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shellpepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
On to Plan Commission item 9B, consider act on the preliminary plot map for Old Highlander subdivision located east of Paganica Golf Course, north of Briarwood subdivision, south of Whitman Hills subdivision, and west of Olympia Fields development.
Thank you. We have a preliminary plat that was received by the city to divide this into single-family lots. The location, as you mentioned, it's over by the Olympia area there. This is the existing zoning that the Common Council has seen in the past and has approved. Not all of this area is being platted right now. This area right in here, for example, is the Northern Range development. That's not part of this plat, but what is this RML and this SRPD, and up in here RML. So these kind of 3 areas are being platted along with probably the URPD back here that's remaining unchanged. They did submit what was called a general development plan when they came in for their PD zoning. And it's really important to understand that this has a general development plan that we've seen and approved. Makes my life very easy because when the plat comes in, it must be consistent with this. So on that plan development, there was 294 lots on the Old Highlander preliminary plat, which we're looking at right now. Northern Range, as I mentioned, had 270 units. The reserve at Old Highlander condos is the next item. There was 58 units. That totaled 622 residential units. So the first part of that Old Highlander preliminary plat, this item right now that you're looking at is 294 dwelling units. So this is the plat. It's not to exceed the 294 units. This is consistent with that general development plan that I showed you a couple slides ago. Being a PD, we can ask for landscaping requirements. The applicant who's here tonight, Brian with Newman Developments, they submitted a landscaping plan, and they showed that all the planting areas, including, here it is, on the Briarwood subdivision, there was concerns about plantings being here and here, so that they do have a nice buffer. There's 50 feet in length and then a lot of plantings to be put in. They have benches and details of those areas. They have 6 different little areas for the benches shown as these little boxes here. So there's benches throughout the area as well. So with that, I'm recommending approval of the preliminary plat for Old Highlander subdivision. It's located, again, east of Paganica Court, west of Olympia Fields development, north of Briarwood subdivision.
Questions, comments from council?
I have a couple.
Alderman Rozak.
On the preliminary plat, it still shows the stub out for Mackenzie Lane.
You know,
In his presentation it does, but it shouldn't be in the packet.
in the packet,
Preliminary
it's,
plat right here.
in your packet, it's,
Okay, it's
Yeah.
not, it's not
I
gonna be a built-out
apologize.
road.
There's been a lot of different maps, and this is, I've had them update all of the plans to show nothing connecting to
And then
Mackenzie
you've got the
Lane.
landscape notes that show what appears to be a road in the landscape.
Right,
notes.
that's not accurate. I did not change out the presentation, apparently.
Well, but it's in the, like I said, if you look at the preliminary plat on this page, it looks like a road, but it's just the right-of-way still there?
Correct.
You guys don't want to build another house there?
No, the right-of-way has to be there
Oh.
for utilities.
Plant some trees there.
We
They
can't.
can't, it's a utility easement.
Oh, okay. Just bushes? Will bushes grow over the? Okay. The other, I appreciate the landscape stuff. My one comment for the Newman guys in general, I don't think the paths in this development are being deeded to us, right? You guys are keeping the paths under your control. The paths in your new subdivision in Summit, the paths are in very, very, I would consider poor state of repair. The paths themselves are great, but along the paths are terrible. It's like never been properly seeded, graded, et cetera. So I don't know that I need to add anything to the developer's agreement or the preliminary plat on this, but Jason, I'm just putting you on notice as they build these paths out and it becomes a connectivity for people in this area that they look nice and that they're actually graded, not massive stones and garbage along the side of the paths. That it looks okay. Yeah, run them with her. She'll,
go.
that's my only comment. Everything else looks fine between that road issue that answers that, and then just a note on the paths that we keep track of how that looks as it's getting put in.
And the comments about Mackenzie Lane were brought up at Plan Commission. Consistent with True, but
I knew you guys weren't pulling a fast one. I just thought maybe the documents. were
any
bad.
other questions or comments for Mr. Gallo or applicant? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion.
Rozak, second.
Any further questions, comments? Call roll, please.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Under our next item, consider act on approving the jurisdictional offer related to the condemnation of easements and restrictions.
No,
Oh, wait.
one.
9C.
I'm sorry, I jumped down one section. Sorry about that, guys. Consider act on the condominium plat for the old reserve at Old Highlander located north of Old Highlander Drive between Mackenzie Lane and Scottsland Lane.
So again, it's described as kind of this area that's hanging in the middle of the Olympia area, Old Highlander. It was part of the, well, I should say it's highlighted with the red dots right there in the center of your screen. It was on the general development plan as identified as section number 7 there, outlined with the dark dots. So that it was, this can't be platted as a subdivision plat because this is actually a condominium plat. So it was approved with the proper zoning, RML, that's our residential multi-unit low, that does allow for duplexes by right in that district. So I just wanted to point that out. And then this is what it looks like. It's a condominium plat. This is what you're acting on. And again, they did submit landscaping plans. I didn't include all of them. There's many on the packet that you received digitally. I just wanted to show you that there is landscaping plans submitted. And they did provide the condominium declarations in the packet. So we went through those a little bit. The Plan Commission did recommend approval of the Old Highlander, the reserve at Old Highlander condominium plat.
Questions, comments for Mr. Gallo?
Sorry.
Alderman Rozak.
Yeah, I'm just, there's, like, on this, and this is a great one, the Sterling Drive is a common road, or is a private roadway, right? And the other ones are public. The public roadways in the developer's agreement and the condominium plats all say that those public roads have to be to public standards. The private roads do not. Are the private roads in this development getting curbs? They're not, are they still being curbed?
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Yeah, hey, Brian.
Newman Developments. Yes, they are. They're getting a different style of curb. It's more of a, it's an 18-inch, so not as wide.
Okay.
And we call it a rolled curb
Yeah.
versus a high back.
Yeah, that's
curb.
good.
So
'Cause
it will be a noticeable difference.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fine, because I've seen a few other the developments where we get into the private roads and the condos and they don't curb what appears to be a main road, like thoroughfare, and it looks strange because of the density, and it feels like it's, going to be a problem for drainage and other things over time. So I appreciate that you're doing that. That was my only question on this one, on the condo plat.
Other questions, comments from council? Mr. Gallo.
This is called a preliminary condominium plat. This is a little different than what we normally do. Usually, the developer knows exactly what style they're going to build, and then they come in and with a final, and that's all we really see. But when they come in, they're going to do this as an expandable condominium development. So let's say they build 4 units, and a couple people wanted 3 seasons, sunrooms, or something off the back. They'll actually build those units first, and then they'll come in with kind of an as-built drawing. So you'll see this in chunks, and I think for financing purposes, Brian mentioned to the Plan Commission that that's probably what their strategy is gonna do. There might be, I don't know, 4 or 5 different phases at least.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So this, what we call preliminary condominium plat, is not something that's recognized by the state for platting purposes, but it's commonly requested, so you can kind of see the vision that we're going to put forth in this condominium development. We will formally plat a couple of buildings at a time, so 2, maybe 4 units, 4 buildings, because that really is driven by conventional financing purposes. So there are rules that you have for conventional financing, meaning Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, stuff that the banks can sell on the open market. They will not finance a condominium that is not at least 50% sold. So if we went ahead and platted this entire thing, it would be quite a struggle to try to sell units. You'd have to work with local banks and specialty financing. The other benefit of doing it as an expandable plat is that when we have a recordable section, our builder partner knows exactly what they're building. So on that condominium plat, you have the correct and accurate boundary of the unit represented on that, versus this has some built-in flexibility to it, where the builder Harbor that will be building these for us has 2 different distinct styles with different options available for these floor plans, and when they plat it, the plat is accurate and you can rely upon it in the future. Thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. Like to entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
On to new business, consider act on the developers agreement for Old Highlander Phase 1.
All right, thanks again. Just to bring this back up, this is the developer's agreement for this project and development that you just were going through. So I'm just going to bring up a quick, hopefully this is the right one. But this is the phasing plan, as this is the developer's agreement for Phase 1 of this development, as it will come in phases. And as Jason Gallo had explained, Phase 1 will, as you have seen, some dirt already moving, but it will consist of the primary road of Paps Road to be going in and getting installed, and then working their way to the west with the single family and the condo areas. So again, developers agreement for our city public infrastructure to get included in the inside of this work and development, has a lot of our typical standards inside of it. The big component here is that it's also attached with a TIF, and it references many of the conditions inside of there as well.
Questions or comments from Alderman? I have a question for you, Brian. what's your kind of timeline that you could share that you think, if life is good, Phase 1 will be completed?
Boy,
All
if
the- all the
life
light
is
blue.
really good to us and we get some nice, dry, warm weather through the end of the year, we still do hope to have it paved, which would include Pabst Road connection from Olympia Fields down to Oconomowoc Parkway. It would include Old Highlander Drive, looping west and north to our clubhouse location and some of the smaller offshooting streets. We're working on it. The grading is going really well. There's a lot of earthwork going on right now out there. The ponds are almost formed. You can see Pabst Road if you go out there and kind of starting to get defined. You'll see a lot more filling starting probably this week yet on the Mandel piece, to start to get those pads up to grade and elevation. We're working with I believe the entire engineering staff and DPW right now to work through dewatering, which is critical to get the sewer brought up from Oconomowoc Parkway. The groundwater is pretty high in that area. So as soon as we get through those steps, I would anticipate we have all of our permissions from the DNR and we'll be full bore on pipe and going like crazy. So keep your fingers crossed for us. We're not slowing down.
How's
Thank
that
you.
bridge, what's that bridge gonna look like? You guys gonna do something nice with that bridge, or is it gonna look?
Yeah, so it's a few equalizer pipes, so I don't really want to call it a bridge. It's filled in, so there'll be a few equalizer pipes that get placed in there, so that linear pond that ties all the way into the main pond in the north. What happens is as it rains and everything runs down into the larger pond and the linear ponds, they kind of equalize at a certain level and then it gets into the groundwater. We are, amongst this landscaping plan plus some additional detail work we're doing now, we've got some entrance monuments being designed on Oconomowoc Parkway. We want to highlight those two crossings with some stone columns and fence work along with obviously a bunch of plantings and things outside of the right-of-way on the private side, so.
Well, I appreciate that.
Something nice with the bridge then?
The road crossings of linear ponds, yes, not bridges. We will be highlighting them with nice landscaping, fence structures, with stone columns, so, yeah, they'll look nice. The paths will be connected throughout the community. We'll cross over them.
I appreciate that updates. A lot of people are asking those questions. Any other questions from council? I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussions or comments? A call roll, please.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shellpepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Next item, consider act on approving jurisdictional offer related to the condemnation of easements and restrictions for property owned by Fleming Investments Incorporated, tax key OCOC 614980004, located at 1400 Summit Avenue. Attorney Riffle.
This is kind of like deja vu all over again to the 9th degree. We've been talking about the fact that there were all of these restrictions and easements that were put together by Basari a long time ago when Basari owned all of the land in different entities in order to have internal circulation all the way around all of the properties that were part of his holdings. And part of it were private roads, private utilities, and as you all know, ad nauseum, we've talked about the fact that in order to make the whole project go, we had to wipe out those private restrictions. Right now, we have a pond on, or a portion of a pond on some of the areas that are encumbered by these restrictions and easements. You know, the Panera is going in next door. The primary issue that Fleming has raised relates to an easement that they believe that still exists on the property to the south that Panera is slated to go into. You can recall that we obtained an appraisal about a year ago now. in terms of what would be the damages, if any, if we wiped out these restrictions. Our appraiser felt that there was a substantial benefit to the property. The property value would go up as a result of us eliminating these restrictions and making this development possible. They got an appraisal that said because we're wiping out certain turning movements to the south, and it would eliminate the possibility of commercial deliveries in semi-trucks to this facility, that it would go from a property where the highest and best use was for commercial retail to business, even though they have been, delivering stuff all these years the same way by traversing the road and then coming in, backing off the road. So, heeding that, I have obtained an easement for the benefit of the public and for the benefit of their property specifically, that will allow truck movements through Panera and up and in. I've alerted them to that fact. They're still not happy with that easement, but at some point in time, we would be facing an inverse condemnation claim that I do not want to face. It's not the right thing to do. We've been talking about this forever. In discussions with OneGuard, you know that we will have an agreement, and we already have an agreement. OneGuard's paying 100% of the costs dealing with this issue with the Flemings. And we will have an agreement coming forward at a future meeting before we pull the trigger on this, and I'll explain what that means in a second, that in the event there are any damages that are awarded by a judge or a jury in a court of law, they will be responsible for 100% of that. There are TIF dollars that are tied to them at the end of this that will be utilized as collateral or security to make sure that, and I believe it's $1.3 million, something in that order. So, this is the first step. We send them this. They have 20 days to say yay or nay. I assume that they'll say nay. We will still be talking to OneGuard and to Fleming during the 20-day period and see if we can work something out amicably based upon the track record. That's not going to happen in my estimation, but we will continue to try to work with them. They're good corporate citizens of this community. We want to try to do whatever we can within reason. This is the step that starts the final end of the process of condemning those easements and restrictions. They have 20 days to accept this. If they do not accept it, the next step would be filing an action in circuit court. It's a two-pronged process. First, under 3206 Wisconsin statutes, the court determines whether we have a right to take these easements and restrictions. There is a statute in Chapter 62, which is the city chapter of the statutes, that says you have a right to do this, period, black and white. So that would be the first step. Then we would have the restriction, then we would eliminate them, and then you go on to the second step is, what are their damages? And if we have to fight that for 3 years, we'll fight it for 3 years, and it'll be on OneGuard's dime. Any questions?
Alderman Spiegelberg.
What conditions do we have the right to take it?
I don't have it in mind. It's 6214.7A3 or something. It's right on, if you want me to show it to you, I will. You want me to dig it up?
You don't have to do that now. I'm just curious.
No, it's black and white. It
Okay.
says you have the power and the authority to obtain through condemnation easements, restrictions, or other conditions affecting the land for purposes of any public purpose, and this is certainly a public purpose.
I'd like to entertain a motion.
Rozak, so moved.
Second.
Any further discussions, comments? Call roll, please.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Next up, mayoral appointments with council confirmation. Consider act on interim utility manager appointment. It is my recommendation to reappoint Mark Fry as interim utility manager for 90 days, pending council approval. I'd like to open up for discussions or a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Any further discussions, comments? Please call roll.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Do we have any staff reports, Mark?
Yeah, I do. I didn't know if I was going to make these comments tonight or if I was going to wait until we're actually in the budget workshop. But I just want to point out and thank Lori Sullivan Murray for all the excellent work she does on budgets. This was my second budget that I worked with her as city administrator, and Lori's knowledge of the financing and everything in the budget, because I'll look at her and say, well, why can't we just do this? And she'll give me 4 reasons why I can't. Whether or not they're right, I don't know, but I know to trust Lori. And as she mentioned, you know, the budget that came here tonight is many months of work from her and her team. But I you know, and it's a team effort all the way through. It's all the department heads, everybody works on this. But Lori is what makes these budgets work and brings it to you and explains it in a way that's understandable. And we do look forward to going through the budget workshop and completing the budget for 2024. But I did want to thank Lori for all of her work.
Any comments from Alderman? Alderman Altman Cloth.
I have 2 comments. So one not so fun and one a little bit more fun. First of all, when it came to Fall Fest last weekend, 2 weekends ago, it was an awesome event from a city resident perspective. As an alderman's perspective, it was, some of the feedback we got was pretty negative, or I got was pretty negative. One of the things was, which interestingly enough, because we just talked about Pedal Tavern tonight, was, you know, Pedal Tavern kind of got in trouble for blocking handicap parking. I had some business owners and some residents witness blocking off handicap parking so that we could get porta-johns in, and they were blocked off for a pretty significant amount of time. So if it's not okay for the Pedal Tavern to block off handicap parking, it's not okay for the downtown businesses to do it to get the porta-johns in. The second thing was the water from the dunk tank, which looked like a super fun thing, but it really did affect quite a bit of businesses downstream.
The
Literally,
water ran downstream?
The water, yes.
Oh, really?
And then, yeah, so that's something that really needs to be kind of, I don't know who allows that, who doesn't allow that, but that's something that needs to be reconsidered for next year. And then the parking, and I've talked with Chief a little bit about this, and I know that there's probably no perfect solution, but not you. What I would love to see, though, is like where Tim's Auto is and O'Reilly's and Java Hut and Papa Murphy's, is for the Downtown Business Association to just kind of go above and beyond for our business owners and maybe get some sandwich board signage that says not Fall Fest parking. I think at minimum, that's what they can do. While in a happy world, I would love for Chief to put, you know, a bunch of CSOs in all these private lots, then say there's no Fall Fest parking. We know that the resources are limited, and I understand we can't do that. So those are my not so fun things. Did Bob Duffy leave?
Yes.
Oh, I am so disappointed. So today, as a mother of high schoolers, I was reading all of the high school homecoming information. And do you know that the parade marshal is going to be our very own Bob Duffy?
No.
No.
That's
Yes,
maybe
he
why
didn't
he
share.
left.
So I was very excited to see that Bob Duffy is going to be
Very good.
our parade marshal for the homecoming parade next Friday.
Okay. Any other comments from Alderman?
Parking structure.
Oh, I see.
Then we'll move on to comments from Mayor. I just wanted to share something with you that I was not aware of, and I became aware of it on Monday. There's a group, a nonprofit, a national nonprofit group called Folds of Honor, which I'd never heard of before. And I had been invited to it by several folks, and I went to it on Monday. It was held at the LaBelle Golf Club, and it was really, really special. And if you have a chance, take a look at that. You had 2 Navy SEALs jumping out of airplanes, coming down. It was just a wonderful, what?
Hope they had a shoot.
He did. They did. It could be her, I don't know. but they came down. It was really, really a special event. And the focus of that group, I just want to share this with you because I was unaware of it. And maybe you guys know about it, I'm just slow. But the focus of the group is to develop scholarships for our fallen heroes' families. So all the veterans and all those folks who we lost in wars and for other reasons, is to help those families, not just the kids, but also the spouses, et cetera. And they had raised over $250 million. And they've supplied scholarships to over 50,000 folks. Now, I'm going to give a shout out to the Newman Company because they're the ones that have brought this to, along with Lac LaBelle, have brought this to the state of Wisconsin, because it's the only one in the state of Wisconsin. And they're working on trying to build a chapter here in the state of Wisconsin. So they tied in with Minnesota, and the Minnesota chapter came in. But it's something that, yeah, it was incredibly moving. And Matt Newman said something that made so much sense. He said, this is for our heroes. We're not red, we're not blue. We're red, white, and blue. And you saw that in all the different things that were happening. It was extremely moving. And also in association, they honored one of our own. They honored Dirk Debbink. And as they came down with the American flag, Dirk Debbink and his family were presented with the American flag. They do, and that is a golf outing and a fundraiser where they raise money for these scholarships. But it's amazing all the things that go on in Oconomowoc, and there's always something new you find. And it's all because this community really binds together and does things together. And I think that's really pretty darn special. So I wanted to share that with you as a fun experience for me. And hopefully maybe more of us can go to that next year if they have it again. So I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.